being held with the temporary suspension and enhancement of the open meeting law requirements by Governor Baker. Instructions, that's it. And the first order of business is announcements, open session, and public comments. Public comments must be brief, and the board will not deliberate or vote on any matter raised solely during announcements and public comments. Let's see, do I have anything?
Mr. Chairman, I have one if I may.
Okay, Maria.
Sure, I just want to mention up front, because over the last few days, we've received a lot of emails about the land clearing on Route 6 and concerns about that. And the Public Works Department has denied the curb cut there. Granted, due process is in order and the applicant has the option to appeal that. But I just wanted to let folks know that that has been denied.
Okay.
I have a comment.
Go ahead, David.
Thank you. My name is David Mead Fox. I have just a few brief comments I'd like to make about the Assistant Town Administrator position that we all know is currently in the process of being filled. And I want to say at the outset, this will be 2 minutes. I'm on the Energy Committee, Energy and Climate Action Committee, and the Planning Board, but these remarks are mine alone. I'm not speaking for either group. I'd like to urge the Town Administrator and Select Board to select a new ATA who has strong experience with planning, grants, and climate action work. As outlined in the recent letter from the Planning Board, I believe it is crucial to have a strong planning and climate action role in town administration. These two areas are logically and conceptually linked and will take on increasing importance over the coming years. In addition, with the new administration in Washington and targets set by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, it's likely that the new and possibly significant public grant funding may become available. We should be ready for this, in my view, by having the ATA be a grant coordinator to do 3 things: locate funding opportunities, ensure that effective writers are hired, available in town departments and/or drawn from town volunteer committees and boards, and 3, monitor execution of awarded grants. Now, as we all know, the ATA will have a lot on their plate, and I'm concerned that significant administrative responsibilities, planning, grant coordination, and climate action work will be extremely difficult and probably impossible for one person. Therefore, I also recommend that the town seek to evolve towards 2 positions. And I mean evolve. I know how difficult it is to create even one new position, any new position. But evolve over time to an ATA and a full-time position responsible for planning, grants coordination, and climate action work. To assist with this notion, the Energy and Climate Action Committee is actually working on a job description that we will provide to the town administrator and select board, just as some food for thought and some detail. Ultimately, and I'll go really out on a limb here, but I think in the shorter, sooner than we think, it will likely be beneficial to have 3 positions: an ATA, a planner and climate action coordinator, and a grants coordinator. I know that creating even one is, again, extremely difficult, much less 2. But I really believe both could bring in grant funding dollars far in excess, I mean far in excess of their salaries, and have a critical impact on the health and welfare of our town. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Chief Polly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. I know you have a piece of correspondence in your packet, but I wanted to recognize several members of the fire department. On January 4th, we responded out to a incident involving an individual having chest pains. Paramedics, firefighter paramedics, Justin Kinshar and Gary Doolittle responded out immediately. And as they got there, the individual went into cardiac arrest. The 2 paramedics immediately started CPR and advanced life support. They were then joined by Captain Joe Capello, firefighter paramedic Colleen Phelan, and EMT Erica Powell. And en route to the hospital, the individual was basically brought back to life between their actions, activities, interventions, and training. And again, I just want to recognize firefighter paramedic Justin Kinshaw, firefighter paramedic Gary Doolittle, firefighter paramedic Colleen Phelan, EMT Eric Powell, and certainly Captain Joe Capella. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Chief. Lillian Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity just to address you very briefly. I do concur with David Mead Fox about the the assistant position that, and I am speaking for myself and not for the committee which I am on, is the Energy and Climate Action Committee. I do concur that I do believe that that would be very beneficial to the town to have that position include those responsibilities. I also wanted to say that the Cape Cod Commission just recently passed the revisions to the regional policy plan, and they are coming over to the Assembly of Delegates. Was just recently appointed on 2 standing committees at the Assembly of Delegates. I'm chair of the Natural Resources Committee and vice chair of the Telecommunications and Energy Committee. And therefore, because I am a chair, I am on the Government Regulations and Rules Committee as well. And we will be having a meeting tomorrow to discuss and hopefully recommend the changes to the regional policy plan to the full Assembly, which would be a forthcoming vote. So those changes to the RPP include new dimensions as far as climate action is concerned, and the Cape Cod Commission is now working on an actual climate action plan. There is a lot of resources on their website, and I encourage everyone to go and look at that website. It's really impressive. They've done an incredible amount of work in the staff has in the past 6 months. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Lily. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone else here. Okay, the first order of business is licenses.
Mike, it's Helen.
Oh, Helen, I didn't see your hand up.
Mike?
Yep, I see it now.
Yeah, here's the thing.
Go ahead.
As always, I don't vote on something which affects the finances of my abutter. So pull out Moby Dick and do it separately from all the others.
Okay,
That's the way we do it. Okay?
okay, that's fine.
So you can do it first or do it second. Thank you.
Okay. So this is the approval of annual renewal of common victular licenses. So we will, if somebody wants to make the motion and remove Moby Dick's off of there.
So, Mr. Chair, I would move to approve all common victular licenses, barring none of the selectmen from recuse. Or do any select people want to recuse from this besides Helen? Any reason to? If not, I'll move it. Nobody there? Okay.
Helen, excuse me. Janet, Helen wants to vote on the others.
I know.
Okay.
I'm just asking if anybody else has any other recusals. Okay. So I move to approve all common victular licenses as follows: Blackfish Variety, Block and Tackle, Blue Willow, Boathouse Fish Market, Bob's Sub and Cone, Bocce Italian Grill, Bowl Organic Bowls, Bookstore and Restaurant, Box Lunch, Ciraldi's, Chaquesset Yacht and Country Club, Seashore, Cumberland Farms, Dent Donuts, Emac and Bolio's, Endless Coast, Flying Fish Cafe, Fox and Crow Cafe, Gelato Joy Cafe, Harbor Stage Company, JB's Pizza Bar and Grill, Max Seafood Market, Max Seafood Takeout, Max Shack, Maurice's Campground, Pearl Restaurant, PB Boulangerie, PJ's Family Restaurant, Van Rensselaer's, Wellfleet Beachcomber, Wellfleet Marketplace, Wellfleet Preservation Hall, The Wicked Oyster, and Winslow's Tavern.
Second.
Hold on, I think just to correct something, it's Dunkin' Donuts, not Dent Donuts.
No, it's Dent Donuts.
Oh.
Donuts.
It is?
Yeah.
Legally, yes.
They're called, okay, all right, Dent Donuts. And then the other thing, I think, did you read Wellfleet Harbor Actors Theater on there?
Yes, I did. I think so. Yeah. I'll read it now if I didn't. Actors Theater.
It's down at the bottom, right, justified.
Okay, I think I did, but if I didn't, I will read Wellfleet Harbor's Actors Theater also included.
Okay. Second. Roll call vote.
Janet, I.
Justina, I.
Brian, I.
Michael, aye.
Helen, I.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve Moby Dick's?
Second. So moved.
Okay,
Seconded.
second.
Whatever.
Roll call vote, sorry. I just got a little confused.
I got it. Janet, I.
Justina, I.
Brian, I.
Michael, aye.
Helen, recused.
Okay. Now, renewal of weekday entertainment licenses. Someone want to make the motion? Does anyone need to recuse from this?
Mr. Chairman, don't you have to go back and do Moby Dick's?
We did.
We did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, snuck it in there. Hearing no recusals, I move to approve the renewal of weekday entertainment licenses, the Block and Tackle, Bocce Italian Grill, Bookshore Restaurant, Seashore, Flying Fish Cafe, Harbor Stage Company, PB Boulangerie Bistro, Pearl Restaurant, Van Rensselaer's, Wellfleet Beachcomber, Wellfleet Harbor's Actors Theater, Wellfleet Preservation Hall, The Wicked Oyster, and Winslow's Tavern.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, I.
Justina, I.
Brian, I.
Michael, aye.
Helen, I.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Renewal of Class 2 licenses.
Nope, Sunday entertainment licenses. Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Renewal of Sunday entertainment licenses.
I move to approve the renewal of Sunday entertainment licenses as follows. The Block and Tackle, Bookstore and Restaurant, Harbor Stage Company, PB Boulangerie Bistro, Wellfleet Beachcomber, Wellfleet Harbor Actors Theater, Wellfleet Preservation Hall, and The Wicked Oyster.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, I.
Justina, I.
Brian, I.
Michael, aye.
Helen, I.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Now on to renewal of Class 2 licenses.
Hold on, Mike.
Yes?
Yes. For Rebecca, don't forget that in both cases for the entertainment licenses for both kinds, they get a copy of the noise bylaw with their, license.
Yes, I have that written down. I will send it to them tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, renewal of Class 2 licenses.
I move to approve the renewal of Class 2 licenses, L&R Auto, Wellfleet Service Center, and Wellfleet Service Center.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote.
Janet, I.
Justina, I.
Brian, I.
Michael, aye. Motion carries 5-0. Okay,
Mr. Chair, may I interrupt for one moment?
sure.
I forgot I had an announcement. I want to wish Ryan Curley happy birthday and say thank you for all the work he's doing and for being a wonderful new member, especially coming in during COVID. He's been great.
Thank you.
Second.
Yes. All in favor. Aye, aye, aye.
Favor.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Ryan.
Thank you for showing up.
Thanks, Janet.
You're welcome.
Okay, so now we have board and committee appointments and updates. The first one is Kevin Coakley. Is he on the line?
Yes, I am.
Hi, Kevin.
How you doing, Michael?
Pretty good. So you want to be on a Marina Advisory Committee? I see your experience here. Do you want to just give us a little synopsis of why you're interested in that committee and
Sure. I've had a charter boat, fishing charter business on the pier. I started in the mid 1990s. I've watched the harbor evolve throughout the years, and at present I'm on the dredge task force. I got on it about a year ago, so I'm very familiar with the harbor, and I just want to help make the harbor a safe and pleasurable experience for both the commercial and recreational boaters that are going to use it, especially now with the dredging. There's going to be some issues that are going to be coming down the pike. So I just want to be a part of it. And I think with my expertise and experience, we can work together with the harbor master and put together a effective plan.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Kevin?
Yeah, I do.
Helen?
Hi, it's me.
Hi, Ellen.
Hi, Mr. Coakley. Thank you so much, especially with your background. And don't take this personally, but remember, if somebody on a board or committee is going to be voting on things that affect their finances or that they may have an appearance of conflict about, you have to come to us and do a disclosure about it. So, for example, I see that your charter boat business is still operating out of the Marina.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so that's good. It's good to have people with experience about that, about what it's like. You're not an outsider, but if you want to vote on something that affects your finances or has the appearance of maybe prejudice, and other people on the Marina committee would probably be able to help you out with this, you fill out a disclosure to us and we give you dispensation to do it, right? Otherwise, you'll have conflict of interest. It's an easy process. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the board? No? Can I have a motion?
I move to approve Kevin Coakley to be appointed to the Marina Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote.
Janet, I.
Christina, aye.
Brian, I.
Michael, I. I don't hear Helen.
Oh, Helen, I, sorry.
Okay. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Appreciate you volunteering your time, and I'm sure you'll be a good asset to that committee. So thanks.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you all.
Next on the list is Nancy Nami. Is that correct pronunciation? Is Nancy on here? She is.
Nancy Nudge Me.
Nudge me. Okay. Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So usually when we have somebody apply to a committee, we just sort of ask them to kind of introduce themselves to the town and why they want to serve, explain why they want to serve on the committee and how they could potentially contribute.
So I've loved Wellfleet my whole life, and we bought a home here 10 years ago. And just this past year, we moved here full time. And I'd like to get involved in the community. And I have been involved in a recycling committee back in the early 90s when recycling first came to previous town that I lived in. And while living down here, I've learned a lot from the people who work at the transfer station. And a neighbor of mine is the chairperson of the recycling committee and told me there were some openings. And I thought I would like to meet the people on the committee and help keep it going, because I think the transfer station does an excellent job on educating people on what can and cannot be recycled. And it's very important because it's a huge cost to the town that will continue to be there. So I think it will continue to be important, and I hope that I can contribute.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Anything from the board? No, not seeing anything?
Yeah, one thing. So I just wanted to wish you a happy retirement. Because
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion?
I move to approve the appointment of Nancy Najmi to the Recycling Committee.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Janet, I.
Justina, aye.
Brian, I.
Michael, aye.
Ellen, I.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Thanks a lot, Nancy.
Thank you.
Okay, have a nice night. Gordon Kahn to Historical Commission. Is Gordon on here?
I'm here.
Hi, Gordon.
Hey, how are you, Michael?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thanks.
So, would you like to give a little synopsis of why you want to be on the Historical Commission and what you can bring to the commission?
Sure. I also have loved Wellfleet for my whole life and have recently moved here year-round. I'm a licensed architect. I have a practice in Manhattan where I do residential architecture, historic preservation, and also modernist work. I, in the past, have served on the New York City Landmarks Commission and on the Upper West Side Advisory Board for Landmarks Preservation. I think I have a real feel for Wellfleet, and I love the notion of its kind of beautiful historic houses, its funkiness, which I really appreciate. The fact that we're not Edgartown and we're not Chatham or Chilmark, but we're Wellfleet and we have a unique identity. And I think that, preservation of our old houses and our modernist houses is critically important to the town.
Okay, thank you. Anything from any of the board?
I've got my hand up. It's Helen.
Helen.
Mr. Khan,
Helen,
thank you. Hi, thank you for bringing your willingness and your experience. You understand that if we go back to not meeting virtually, you will have to come to meetings, whether you're living in New York or not. Okay.
Helen, yeah, I'm going to be living here full time. I go to New York generally on Wednesdays or Thursdays, but that's flexible because I still do maintain the practice there. But I'm really headquartered here.
Yeah, and if you miss 4 meetings in a row, you're off, and we need people to get on and be committed. So just so long as you understand that, thank you.
Yes, I do understand, and I'm committed.
Wonderful.
Okay, thanks for bringing that up, Helen.
Sure. Is there anything else I can tell you about my background? Let me think. I went to Columbia.
No.
Was 17 years old when I entered Columbia. My first job in architecture was that summer. No, you don't need any of that, Helen. Okay.
Well, we appreciate it, and I mean, I can see from here that, and hearing you that you're more than qualified to serve on this committee. But I appreciate Helen reminding those who are. Well, I guess you're a resident now, right?
I am a resident, registered to vote, Massachusetts license.
Okay. But those who are non-residents who join the committees, that they do have to be at the meetings once we're off this Zoom situation, if and when, I guess I should say. I'm going to say when. Okay. Justina, you got your hand up?
Yes, I do.
Go ahead.
In addition to your distinguished background, I wanted to thank you for a couple of comments when you said that you get Wellfleet's funky character. And when you said you appreciate it, that we're not Edgartown or Chatham, because I grew up here with a mother, an Ivy League educated mother, who would say, I don't want our yard to look like Chatham, which there was no risk of. So welcome to our town. And I'm glad to hear that you appreciate our aesthetic as we move forward and into preserving it and hopefully continuing to keep our character. It sounds like you'll be a good voice for our town, and thank you.
Thank you for saying that, Justina. I'm with you.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I move to approve the appointment of Gordon Kahn to the Wellfleet Historical Commission.
Second?
Okay, roll call vote, please.
Janet, I.
Christina, I.
Ryan, I.
Michael, aye. Motion carries 5-0.
No, Helen, I.
Oh, Helen, I almost forgot you, Helen.
Either I forget or you forget. I'm here.
I counted you. I just didn't hear you. Okay.
Oh, great.
I just assumed it was an aye. Okay. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Gordon. Appreciate your willingness to serve the community.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Michael, and select people.
Okay.
I'm going to leave now.
Thank you. Okay. James McCullough. Is Jim here? Hi, Jim.
I'm here, yes.
Okay, so it looks like you're interested in serving on several boards or committees. Is there? So the number one is Commission on Disabilities. Are these in order?
They're not in priority order, and I must explain that I sort of expressed a range of interest and hope maybe for some direction on what the most pressing needs of the town are. I mean, it's obvious that I can't have 4 assignments. I can tell you what my 2 priorities would be, however, if that's helpful.
Sure. It would be good to know what your priorities are.
Okay. Well, they would be the Commission on Disabilities and the Historical Commission. And I can go on further to explain why in each case, if you'd like.
That would be great.
As for the Commission on Disabilities, I was a Pupil Personnel Services director for many years in the public schools of Massachusetts and developed programs and services for students with disabilities under the special education law, and also have made Section 504 accommodations that enable people of all ages to participate more fully in daily living activities. So I feel that I have some experience and expertise in this area, and I do have very strong interest in it. So that's my reasoning there.
Okay.
And, as for the Historical Commission, Wellfleet has many historical buildings. The AIM Thrift Shop, where I'm a volunteer and on the board, is one of those structures that was once the town post office. And I served on a building committee in the town of Harvard that converted an historical school building into the town library with a renovation and addition project that preserved the entire exterior structure of the historical building and located the addition behind it and slightly lower than that structure, so that when it's observed from the street, only the original building was visible. It was, I thought, a really wonderful, good use and best and highest use of that building, and a wonderful solution into how to use it. And it's been used since by the town with great joy. And they also understand the historical significance of that just turn of the 20th century building. So I have a strong interest in historical structures and the preservation of them. And I have some experience in doing it that I perhaps could apply.
Okay, I've got 2 board members who have some questions for you. Helen?
Certainly.
Yes. So, Mr. McAuliffe, have you ever, 2 questions. Have you ever been to any of these committee meetings for these committees here?
I have not.
Okay. So, the most important one of them, not to say they don't all have a critical, crucial role, is the Personnel Board, which doesn't have to meet very often. But when it does, it's heavy duty. It's very important. And when I look at your resume, and I get a little sort of experience of you through this tiny contact we're having now. And having been to personnel board meetings, a good number of them over the years, I would say that you would be really good at that, and that we really need a new member on there. I'm not sure how many people, how many vacancies there are on the Historical Commission. Perhaps Rebecca could answer that. We just appointed somebody. Rebecca, how many slots are there left?
One.
How many? One. Okay, so your experience in the other towns sounds good, and your desires to be on the Commission on Disabilities, you know, that's important. That's what you think you'd like to do. But I beg you to consider the Personnel Board. Once again, they don't meet very often. It's very important when they do. And you sound like you'd be good for that. So how many of these would you like to be on? That's the question.
I think I could do two. And I appreciate the guidance you're giving me, because that's really what I was seeking. I was really seeking to know, given the range of these things, what's the best match in terms of what I could offer and what the town needs. And I have, done a lot of personnel work. I conducted many employment searches. We've interviewed and selected candidates. We've negotiated with unions on salaries and benefits. We've developed contracts and policies, and we've helped mediate disputes and grievances. So I am very familiar with all of that, if that's helpful.
So which two would you choose?
Which two would I choose? Well, I think I would choose disabilities and personnel.
Yay!
Okay. Ryan?
Yeah. So, I mean, the Commission on Disabilities badly needs people to even meet. Right. With your if we appoint you to it, there'll be 3 people that are appointed to it currently. In the town charter, it's a 7-person board commission, which means that we'll need one more appointee before there is a quorum. So it might be a while before they're able to meet. If you know anybody who's willing to serve on that committee or commission, I would really encourage you to encourage them to apply, because it is something that's kind of been overlooked in the town for a while. So I'm not even sure the last time that they had a quorum. It's been multiple years at this point. So yeah, and I mean, I wouldn't 100% agree with Helen as to which one is the most important. They're all important. And to me, it's also a matter of which ones do you want to serve on, so that you're willing to stick around for a longer period of time on these boards and provide guidance, knowledge, and input. So, I mean, that's all I have to say on that. But just to make it clear that the Commission on Disabilities might not meet for a while. So I think it would be fine if you're willing to serve on 3, because you might only be serving on effectively participating in 2 for I don't know how long. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, I would say the other issue is that the Personnel Board doesn't meet that often either. So if you do want to serve on 3, I think with Personnel Board and Commission on Disabilities, that might not be a full plate anyways, those 2 boards particularly. Like if you wanted to serve on 3 boards and it was like the Planning Board, the ConsCom, and you know what I mean? It's very different. So if you're interested in serving on those 3 boards, I wouldn't have any problem. It's really up to you.
Yes, I would be.
Okay. Justina?
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably the Commission of Disabilities and the Personnel Board, they're both not really going to necessarily meet. So you might want to pick the Historical Commission and either the Personnel Board or the Commission of Disabilities would be my recommendation.
Mike?
Yep.
So on this motion, which I'd be happy to make, typically we approve the appointment of for a term of, and there are no term ends on here. So if I add the language for terms appropriate to those committees, does that satisfy everybody? Because you've got to put that in there. And then Rebecca, would you please tell Jim when his terms are up?
The Commission of Disabilities does not have terms in its language, so we would have to specify.
Well,
no, it's listed here 3 years on the vacancy report.
Well, for the three of them, they're probably all different, as Ryan just highlighted. So if I say for terms appropriate to those committees, that would cover that. I'm just more concerned that Mr. McAuliffe knows what they are, and also that he has to be sworn in if he wants to participate. That's pretty easy. You go and meet the clerk in the parking lot at Town Hall and freeze. Can I make a motion?
Yes.
I move.
Oh, hold on.
Which boards or which committees? And
The three that he chose. Did you choose the Commission on Disabilities, the Personnel Board, and the Historical Commission?
That is correct.
Okay.
That's what I thought.
Hold on.
I checked.
Justina has her hand up. I forgot she.
No, it's all.
Okay. Go ahead, Helen.
Okay. I move to approve the appointment of James McAuliffe to the Commission on Disabilities, the Personnel Board, and the Historical Commission for terms appropriate to those committees.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, I.
Christina, aye.
Ryan, aye.
Michael, aye.
Helen, aye.
Motion carries 5-0.
Great.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you very much.
Excuse me 1 second, Chair. I just want to tell you that all three of those committees are all 3-year appointments.
Okay.
And Rebecca, just since you're new at this, that when we do get applications, it's good for it to be included in the motion, how long their term is.
I will make note of that. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. And also the people that we just appointed, we didn't have terms on there.
Yeah.
I think it's okay because we appointed them and the terms are listed on the vacancy report, but we should get in touch with them and let them know that.
Yeah.
I forgot about it.
I can do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
No problem. I'll reach
I
out
didn't
to you.
notice it either. It totally went past me that usually we do have those terms in there. Okay.
And Mike,
Yep.
through you to Rebecca, remember, see, I only noticed it because I made the motion, okay? But also tell them the thing that they have to get sworn in because people sometimes don't know that. Or if they're listening now, they'll get it, but they probably left. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Jim, for
Thank you.
putting in time in.
You.
Okay. We're on to business licenses or business license agreement with Eversource. Maria?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you're probably aware, the solar panels at the transfer station and the old landfill have, the panels themselves have been there for quite some time. This was approved a couple of town meetings ago, from 2018. And the connection of those solar panels to start supplying power to the grid has been delayed because of a land court issue. The lease that's in front of you is a way to keep this project moving forward while we have confidence, and our town council has confidence that the land court will rule in our favor. It's just a sort of a clerical error made back in the 50s. So what this lease does is enable us to work with Eversource so that they can get the engineering done to get the poles installed. And, you know, that process itself, they'd be in queue with, you know, their other projects, but that process itself could take a month or two. But this enables the project to keep moving forward while we're waiting for the land court reaction to the paperwork that our town council has sent them. So, and this lease has been reviewed by KP Law and our town council.
Okay, Ryan?
Yes, just so that we're clear, and I think I have this right. This does not include the actual connection of the solar panels to the grid. It just includes the engineering and the siting of a box and something. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's just a way, since the actual easement is still you know, waiting for the court's decision. It's just sort of a creative way to be able to keep moving forward, you know, so we can, you know, get those panels online.
Okay. And then do we have any idea of where that is? Or essentially, has there been any motion on it since our last update on it?
There has not. It could be tomorrow, could be a week, could be a month. It's really in the hands of the court right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
With land court, could be a year. Helen, go ahead.
Yeah, so, hey, Maria or whoever, the money for this stage of getting them up to go, and you explained it just very well in answer to Ryan's question, but the money for that, it's already been appropriated, right? It was in the original contract. Is that true? Do I
Correct.
remember?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You've approved the original contract, and the enabling legislation for that contract was from the 2018 town meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the board? No? Okay, can I have a motion?
I move to approve.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm-
Go ahead, Ryan.
I move to approve the license agreement with Eversource as written.
Second,
Roll call vote?
Janet, I.
Christina, I.
Ryan, I.
Michael, aye.
Ellen, I.
Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. This has been written requiring the signatures of the board, so we'll make that available for you.
Okay, thank you.
Can you use my stamp, please?
Yes. If we
Thank you.
have a stamp for you, we can use your stamp.
You do. I'll let Jean know. Thank you.
Okay, fuel efficient vehicle policy. Ryan, do you want to speak to this first?
Sure. So basically, we adopted the Green Communities Act in 2014. This policy has not been updated since then. So I decided to look at it and see if there's any changes to respond to changes in the marketplace with a greater under the assumption that there's a greater availability of vehicles that surpass the initial guidance that we were giving in the pre-existing policy. And so for ones like police cruisers, there are now hybrid electric police cruisers, same with passenger vans, same with cargo vans. So that exception was no longer really valid. And I wanted to create a stronger standard that says that we're really looking for hybrid electric, or specifically, hopefully, plug-in hybrid electric vehicles or zero emission vehicles. And so since then, the state has come out with a decarbonization plan, which includes the elimination of all non-electric vehicles by 2035. The new federal administration has said they are going to replace the entire, or try to replace the entire fleet of government or U.S. government vehicles with electric vehicles as well. And, you know, we've also had a town meeting vote where the town was broadly saying to try to be as carbon efficient as we possibly can. There are some concerns about the potential costs of some of these vehicles that have been raised. The policy does include some discretion. So it's for municipal use whenever such vehicles are commercially available and practicable. And then the other thing to consider is the fuel expenses of the current fleet. And if we can reduce the fuel expenses of those, you know, the payback period might make it more palatable, especially on high usage vehicles specifically. So thank you.
Helen.
Yes, two things. Ryan, this is good. And you're right. This is the wave of the future, and the future is already happening. And we're going to have electric chargers powered by the solar panels at the dump. So there's only one problem here. There's one section of it that's redundant, or you should add a phrase. I think the policy statement is not necessary and not typical in select board policies. But if you must have it in there, it's unnecessary. It's redundant, even though it comes at the beginning. Do add whenever such vehicles are commercially available and practicable, because it reads as if that's the only thing that could be purchased from now on out. And we got a nice, we got some feedback from departments, and Hillary Greenberg Limos's comment was, given that wording is included throughout the other sections, it makes it doable, right? In other words, if the cheapest, best vehicle, say the fire department can get, is not one of these vehicles, they'd have to be able to weigh that so as to meet their needs. So Ryan, what do you think about taking out that policy statement or adding that phrase?
The policy statement was in the initial policy, and we would have to review the Green Communities Act to make sure that that policy statement of that nature is not required.
Well, then let's just add the phrase, whenever such vehicles are commercially available and practicable.
That sounds fine.
Because otherwise it makes it mandatory from this moment on, and I don't think that's reasonable. We may be in a good place with this within 10 years, 5 years even.
That's fine. Janet?
So I just wanted to report that either today or yesterday, the federal government is announcing releasing grants and funding for electric vehicles to municipalities. And when I was at the Mass Municipal Association conference last week, the governor is also releasing funds for municipalities to purchase electric vehicles and also to install charging stations. So we've got the state and the federal government supporting this, and who's to say when it'll all happen, but it is a direction we're moving in. And thank you, Ryan, for bringing this up.
Chief Polly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do appreciate this topic, and I'm not opposed to the policy as it is practical and forward-thinking. My only concerns were briefly that, we have, as my comments were previously, that we have 3 four-wheel drive vehicles in the fire department. Presently, one is down and will be down for at least a week. And the only other vehicle that's capable of pulling the trailers that we need to trail for rescue purposes with respect to the boat or UTVs or hazardous materials trailer is the present command car. So, the current fleet of electrical vehicles will not allow that to happen. I believe in the future that could happen because technology will evolve. I just don't want to see us boxed in. And I think the language of wherever it's practical is important, but I would just like the board to know that, we will certainly work to support and work within this policy. But with respect to a couple of our vehicles, including the fire department command vehicle and the squad pickup truck, it's just not doable. It's not achievable because the technology is not there. And I'd be open to any other questions. Thank you.
Janet.
Oops, nope, I already said I forgot to lower my hand.
Sorry.
There we go. Sorry.
Justina?
Yeah, I appreciate the chief's comments. I think that, and Ryan's hard work on this, I think that goals come first and then progress towards goals come second. But it's clear from department head feedback that we need, that we all recognize we can't do this overnight. But who knows where we'll be 3 years from now in terms of federal and state funding. And we're sort of setting a goalpost, I think, is how I look at this policy. And we're not going to be able to do it all overnight. In fact, the vehicles aren't on the market to do it all overnight. So I think I'm not saying anything everybody else doesn't know, but I don't think any department head should feel anxiety or pressure that they'll have to come under the gun for things that are not realistically practical yet.
Yeah, I would concur with that. And the one thing I am a little concerned about is, the heavy duty vehicle definition of 8,500 pounds gross vehicle weight. IRS considers it a 6,500 pound vehicle. Right now, any half-ton truck like the shellfish department uses, and this may change in the future, but any half-ton truck is not considered a heavy-duty vehicle in this definition. And I'm just wondering if that's kind of, the key word here really is commercially available and practicable. But I think, as you get into like size of vehicle, and as the chief was bringing up the command car type situation where the command car is never going to be 8,500 pound gross vehicle weight, or maybe they'll have to require that to sort of have the towing capacity that they need because an SUV will be practicable to get as an electric vehicle or a hybrid vehicle, but doesn't actually have the capacity to tow the equipment that they need. So rather than getting a sort of 6,500 gross vehicle weight vehicle, they'll be forced to get a 8,500 pound gross vehicle weight, which would be severely worse fuel economy than a 6,500 would be. So that's my only concern that I've seen here. Just knowing what I pull with my vehicles every day, and sort of I would love to make that switch, but it's not available right now. But even if it did become available, I would need to make sure that could actually pull the weight that I needed to pull. And I think that would hold true with the DPW vehicles and also probably the fire department. Ryan, do you have your hand up still?
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
So in terms of the availability of vehicles with sufficient towing capacity, right now for this model year, Ford has come out with a hybrid electric F-150 with a high towing capacity. Oftentimes hybrids have a higher or produce more torque than a standard gasoline powered vehicle. I did want to leave the heavy duty vehicles out because there's not really a good guidance covering them right now. But there are, I think, so John Deere has hybrid electric tractors now. I mean, it is really becoming more commonplace, but I didn't really want to touch the heavy duty vehicles at this time. So the weight is from the previous policy, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key words here are in here: commercially available and practicable. So I'd be fine with it as is. I would just wanted to raise the concern. Chief, do you have your hand up still? Chief Polly?
I'm sorry, I do not. Sorry about that.
That's fine. I think Helen and then Lily.
Hi there. Yeah, so through you, Mike, to Chief Polly, that's why I added that phrase at the end of the only section of this that had me a little bit worried for departments. And as amended, it will give lots of leeway, but it'll kind of build a fire under departments to do something they might already be doing, which is to keep an eye on the market and keep an eye on what's being made available. And it's going to come to be competitive very soon with the different manufacturers. So this will not force you to do something that isn't practicable, right? And I'm just echoing what's in the language. So I'm ready to make a motion. If somebody, if
I think Lillian.
I do have Lily with her hand up. I'd like to give her a chance to speak. She's had her hand up for a while, and I did say I would call on her. So, go ahead, Lily.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. I support the motion that Helen is about to make, and I applaud Brian for taking on this and doing so much work. I just wanted to make a comment that you all might be thinking about in the future as far as practical. If there is a vehicle on the market and it is double the price, such as one of the letters said was possible, the townsfolk said loud and clear a few years ago at the town meeting that they supported moving in that direction. So I don't think that the departments should be penalized in their budgets if they want to go in that direction. I think somehow you might think about how you could encourage them to do that if there's no grants available from the state or the federal government, which I agree with Janet. I heard those messages loud and clear as well. And I've been reading quite a lot about the new energy grants, and both on the federal and state level, as well as in the county. And but even if those are not available, I mean, there should be encouragement for the departments to move forward if the technology is available, because I do think that the townspeople do support that. So that's the only comment I wanted to make. But thank you for moving ahead with this, and also for your support in moving ahead with getting the PV on the landfill moving forward too. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully we're right on the cusp of this technology shift where, we'll have greater accessibility to bigger vehicles that are fuel efficient. Helen.
I move to adopt the Selectboard fuel efficiency vehicle policy as amended by adding the phrase, whenever such vehicles are commercially available and practicable, at the end of the first paragraph. Thank you.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, aye.
Christina, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Ellen, I.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Okay, the next thing on the list here is a special town election, March 30th, 2021. Maria and
Miss Easley and,
no, this is the town election
oh,
we're on here. Maria?
school building project too, right?
Yeah, we have that after.
All right.
No, special town election is before town meeting.
Yeah.
Superintendent Conrad's on too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this discussion,
Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, this discussion is relative to the process to put the funding in front of the town's voters for the construction of the new high school. So there are several steps in the process, but it is intended to be a regional vote. But I'm going to defer to others to sort of explain the process there. But it's important that we consider all things related to the timing necessary, one, that the school department has relative to its funding from the state, but also relative to our funding or to our scheduling of our annual town meeting. So for that reason, I think you've got a couple of guests that are here with you tonight to talk about, from the school's perspective, what the timing is required for them, and also the gentleman from the school committee is there to talk about the project, but also, Heather had been able to give me a really short and concise explanation of what the two steps are. One is approval of the project going forward, and then the second, the town meeting, is the approval of how the town of Wellfleet will choose to finance its share of the project should the voters approve it. With that, I'll defer back to you, Mr. Chairman, because I know you've got a couple of guests here.
Yeah, Chris Easley. I had gotten an email. You had a statement before?
Yes, Mike, I do. We could probably be a good place to start. As I say, Tom Conrad is here, also the superintendent. We can fully discuss the issue, but here's my statement, and I will submit this to you just so you have a copy of it. I come before you to address the issues that are prevalent in the press and the community discussions today. That is the issues surrounding the high school building project vote and a third extension from the MSBA. In order to fully understand this issue, you've got to understand the history of how the extensions had worked in the past. Last year, our schools closed in March due to COVID and the pandemic facing our society. Town meetings were postponed. The school committee understood that it was necessary to request an extension on the deadline for state funding for the high school building project. The extension was requested, and in essence, an administrative extension was granted. What does that mean? Any project that the MSBA had chosen to fund could get an extension. We received one through through November 1st, 2020. Being optimistic as we always are, and it being the start of the pandemic, the school committee felt that, of course, we'd have COVID-19 under control by the fall, and that, of course, towns would be able to hold town meetings and town elections within a 60-day time frame, as is required by law. As August and September rolled around, the pandemic was only getting worse. More people were dying, more people getting sick, and greater concern and fear among citizens. Realizing the challenges facing people's daily struggles and that the building project was not their priority, and not believing that member towns would be able to meet a 60-day legal deadline to hold town meetings, the school committee felt it should probably at that point ask for another extension from funding from the MSBA. The school committee, through our OPM, our owner's project manager, formally requested an extension. At that point in time, my understanding of the process of an extension for the funding by the MSBA was as follows. The request is first brought before the board meeting. At that board meeting, they discuss the extension and decide whether to grant it or not. The MSBA board meets once every 2 months. I know that from my work on the building committee, every time something had to be submitted for approval by the MSBA board, it was timed to allow their staff to review it and review the work prior to a board meeting. The schedule of the MSBA board set the calendar for the building committee submittals. So we waited for the response from the board. I remember specifically, I went online the day after the meeting in search for the press release that comes out after each MSBA board meeting to see if our extension was granted. The press release after the meeting did not mention our extension. I remember being concerned at that point from the omission. Luckily, a few days later, our OPM, through the Greg Lavasser, the chair of the building committee, we learned that we'd been given an extension through May 31st, 2021. Once again, being optimistic, we felt, of course, our society could have COVID under control by then, and that we should be in good shape, that there'd be no problem having town meetings and having a town election within the 60-day time frame that is required by law. As we got to December, the pandemic is just going through the roof. The daily death tolls are higher, hospitalizations are spiking, and we get highly concerned there won't be orderly town meetings in the spring. A discussion ensued on what we're going to do. The first thought was to ask the MSBA for another extension. In hindsight, we should have, but we did not make a formal request for a third extension. We did make an informal request to the MSBA through our owner's project manager to see if we could get an extension. We were told that the response from the MSBA was to vote the project. By all involved, we took it to mean that no third extension would be allowed. I, in turn, also felt at the time that there was a second meaning to the message from the MSBA. First, that there would be no third extension allowed. Secondly, and to me as important, that it was time to hold the vote, that to postpone it would be detrimental to the ultimate decision on the project. This is the first time for most of us to be involved with a project like this. When your partner tells you to vote the project and they are experts in the field, their words hold extra meaning. They have extra weight. Bringing school building projects to a vote is one of the main things the MSBA does. They do, to their credit, are a very detail-oriented organization. They're involved and pay attention to every aspect of the project and the vote. When we heard that response from the MSBA, I took it to mean that there would be no third extension. I, being one of the main conduits of information to the regional school committee because of my role on the building committee, committee members were told the same. A problem occurred here that has occurred twice in this building project. That problem is messaging. Realizing the importance of the project to our communities, we attempt to keep the message to the public simple and straightforward. Messaging, easy to understand and comprehend. Relying on the no third extension as the main reason for changing the method of bringing the building project to our voters. It's simple in a deadline and easy to understand. Yet as important in the decision is the current stranglehold the pandemic has on our communities. The pandemic has made the future impossible to predict. We all hope life goes back to normal, that town meetings are held in a timely fashion. Yet if there is anything that is certain, it is that no one can predict the future. In March of last year, did any of us really believe that here we would be 10 months later and past 400,000 people dead, have a disastrous rollout of a vaccine program, have new strains of virus with no real knowledge of their potential impact on our lives? I know that I didn't. So requesting our citizens in the next 3 months to sit through town meetings and then go to the polls a week later seemed unimaginable. Being already a year behind in the original plan, believing that by some strange luck that current timing would allow for extremely low interest rates and the belief that the lack of business activity would bring lots of bidders and competition to our project, it seemed to be a bad decision to postpone. But understand, under the previous method of voting for the project, town meetings and then town elections, once the school committee requests the fund for the high school building project, by law, a clock starts. The towns have 60 days in which to hold town meetings and elections to vote for or against the project. If town meetings are not held in 60 days, it is the same thing as if a yes vote occurred. The region is allowed to borrow the money to fund the project. In our thinking, that was not a very democratic process at all. Taking all these factors into account, a single-day election with absentee and by mail and in-person voting seemed to be the best method to bring the question to a vote. Our society this past November 2nd, with the massive turnout during the presidential election, proved that people are willing to participate in voting during a pandemic. So the reasons for changing the method of voting on the project are, first off, safety of our citizens and of our town workers. Knowledge that it could happen, that we could control it, and that we had one day that we could do it in. It also guaranteed a fully democratic method of a one person, one vote, which may not happen with the questionable future of the town meeting schedule. It provides for a decision by May 31st deadline, which we are under, while allowing time for adjusting the planning if the vote should fail. One last point that has caused me great concern in this process. The question on the ballot this March 30th is a solution to a problem. The problem was identified 9 years ago, and the solution was identified roughly 5 years ago. One group involved in developing this solution is the Regional School Committee, whose members are elected from each of our member towns. Those members are taxpayers in our towns. Some attended Nauset High School, some have children who attended Nauset. Some even have their grandchildren in the Nauset system currently. The other group involved is the Building Committee. The membership of the Building Committee is laid out by the MSBA in their regulations. But here, once again, these people are residents of one of our member towns, and each town is represented on the Building Committee. The people on that committee are volunteers who have spent 3 years now at meetings, forums, touring school buildings, and whatever was required of them, working to develop the solution to this problem. They are taxpayers. They are your neighbors. They are the citizens that make town government work. To listen to some of the meetings that have been going on in our towns, as well as reading some of the articles in our press, somehow these volunteers are being villainized for their role in this process. This is just wrong. People are welcome to disagree with the solution to this problem. That's fine. Yet the people that have worked hard to develop this solution, that volunteered their time, their energy, those people that believe they've come up with the best solution to this problem, for that they should be thanked for their time and their efforts. There is no conspiracy here. No one is trying to pull a fast one on voters or pull the wool over someone's eyes. Just a solution to a problem which has taken 5 years to develop. People can dislike and disagree with the solution. All of us will have an opportunity to vote on it at the ballot box. This is how the decisions are made in our region. So I'm sorry that was so long, but I thank you for your time and allowing me to communicate.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Helen.
Hi, couple questions. I think I remember that you said that the deadline is May 31st. Is that correct? Okay. So respectfully to everybody that set up the agenda, this agenda item should have happened after our next one, which is when we're going to decide when our town meeting is going to be. Okay? So I would like to wait to make any decisions about this agenda item until we have resolved if we do that.
Helen, can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, and then I have something else to say. Go ahead.
I believe that this bypasses, this vote that's being held on March 31st, bypasses the need for us to hold a town meeting within that time constraint. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong here.
That's correct.
Okay. So it's not really any bearing on when we set our date for town meeting, whether this happens.
Yeah, but my next point does have something to do with the next agenda item. So for us to do this kind of election, special election, it costs money and it takes staff time, and we're all very aware of that. And if we ordinarily, we'd be having our town meeting at the end of April, right? And then we have an election right after it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And instead of doing it in March, right, and doing it just because of this, we could do it in the normal way after town meeting sometime in May, which I hope will happen sometime later in May so we can do it outdoors again. But that's not for this agenda item. That's the reason I'd like to wait a minute, do the next one, and then decide on this one. Because to have a special election, which costs money and disrupts things administratively quite a bit, no matter how used to it we are now, sure, we can do it in March just because of this. Doesn't make sense to me if you can wait until the last minute, which is May 31st.
Okay.
Thank you.
I apologize. I don't know. I can't find my hand button, or I would put it up, certainly. Just a quick answer to that, though, is that we pay for it. We are paid for the election. So the regional school system pays for the election, for that one-day election. It's part of the regulation. So by the rules, if we change the method by which we bring the question to the voter, so it's not a town meeting and then a town election afterwards, it is a one-day election to determine to fund or not fund the high school. That one-day election will occur in each of the 4 towns at the same hours on the same day. And by law, I believe we are responsible to pay for it. So that it comes from our dollar, not yours.
Mike?
I've got, I think it's Jennifer as my guess on the line right here. I think maybe I'll defer to her for a second and then come back to you, Helen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yep. Jennifer.
Okay. And I just wanted to reiterate what Chris had said on this letter C, special town election. It really should have said district-wide election for March 30th because that's been set. And the hours are 11 to 7. What will be determined is, do we want to hold a special town election duly on the same day as that, with a ballot question on how to pay for our portion of this project? We could have a special town election, or we could put it off to our regular annual town election, which will be after town meeting. Thank you.
Okay. Helen, I'm just going to go to the rest of the board here and then come back to you if you don't mind.
Certainly.
Justine, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Chris Easley, I'm assuming if the school committee set the date for March 30th, that you would like some lead time, although the deadline's in May, you probably need some information prior to that deadline in May.
I'm sorry, I don't know that I understand the question. So, I mean, one of the reasons that we have moved the date, so we have changed the timeframes. I mean, first off, it's just once we request under the other method, under the 4 town meetings and 4 town elections, once we request the funds, there is a 60-day clock starts. And if the towns do not hold town meetings and town elections in that time frame, all of them, so all 4 towns, then they don't get a say in it at all. Without holding a town meeting, we are guaranteed the money. We're allowed to borrow the money without the towns having input. So because of where we stood with COVID and just not knowing what the future is, a way to allow for all people to make their to vote on this project, holding a one-day election. The law allows two methods. This is the other method allowed by law, and the school committee voted to hold it this way. And
Sure. I probably wasn't clear in the way I phrased my question. I apologize. I'm assuming that you'd rather have your answers you'd rather have your election on March 30th and get the data from that election on March 30th than have to wait for the full information till May when Wellfleet has its regular election.
Yes.
Because I'm assuming that although your deadline's in May, there's various paperwork and processes that you need to do, and that May would be late. Although the deadline's in May, you need the information in March, and that's why you said March 30th. Am I correct?
That was one of the reasons.
Yeah.
One of the reasons in the process.
So you can have an orderly process. So to Helen's point, although I know that the special town election of March 30th might entail some work on Wellfleet's part, and then it's funded by NOSIT. This is a once-in-a-generation occurrence to fund a school. I happened to be in the class, the first class at NOSIT.
Really?
Yes, I did. I know it's hard to believe, but I attended double sessions in middle school. And then my class, I was a freshman at the first NOSIT. I remember a lot of the debate about the incredible extravagance of building that high school. And it was many of the same kinds of debates that we're having today. And I'm 61. And so that shows you that that was over 40 years ago. So this is really a once in a generational type of occurrence. Probably 2 generations. And I think that a little bit of extra administrative work is not, we don't want the tail wagging the dog here. I think we should make every effort to help out the school committee for this critical issue. Clearly, it's been a terribly difficult process. I'm in support, and I applaud all your efforts, Mr. Easley, and all your other committee efforts. I'm sure it's been not easy, especially with COVID, and you have my support here.
Yeah, and before we get derailed, I mean, this is a district-wide election, so I don't think we should really be messing around with the date on our end in Wellfleet. Everybody's holding it the same day. Ryan?
Yes. Yeah. So, Mr. Easley, you read out a multi-page statement where you referred to that a problem was identified and that this was the solution. You never defined what the problem was. So, for the record, what was the problem?
There isn't any one problem. The problem was defined back in 2012, when we had a report from Habib, who did a evaluation of each of the buildings owned by the region. And in that report, they determined there would be roughly tens of millions of dollars in repairs necessary over the next 10 years. So we looked at that and we like, this is a little, not thinking that the towns would like to have overrides each year for multi-million-dollar expenses at the schools. At that point in time, we did get together with the town administrators and town financial people and asked them what they would like us to do. And that was how we began this process with the MSBA. We applied for them the first time in 2015, and we weren't accepted in the program. We applied a second time in 2016. In the winter of 2017, we were accepted into the MSBA program, which works with remodeling and rebuilding schools. And the benefit of having them involved with the process is that you have somebody else who has deep pockets, that has some money to pay. And so being part of that program, our current project now will receive $36.6 million from the state government, from the MSBA, for our project.
And I'd just like to point out before I go past the mic here that that's the maximum percentage that they fund. Is that correct?
That is the top. I mean, so it's not a percentage issue. I'm sorry. That is the dollar amount. $36.6 million is what they have set aside to provide to this project. Now that amount could go down, but it would go down only because the cost of the project goes down. So if the contract to build the school as designed comes in less than the estimated, then their cost would come down proportionally, but everybody's expense would come down at that point. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah. I had just read that the amount that they're funding is based on a percentage of the project, and that project and that percentage that they've agreed to fund is the maximum percentage that they ever fund. But maybe that's incorrect. I
don't know that it's the maximum percent. The way they determine that is the financial health of the areas that they're funding, and there are sections of the state school systems in the state that do get, I mean, even in the 80-90% range of funding. So it's all depending on the income in the area in which the school is being built.
Okay. Let's see. I've lost track of whose hand's up next.
May I continue, Mike?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ryan. Sorry about that.
Okay. Oh, no worries. So just, I basically have 3 points. One, just so that everybody is clear. Normally this would go before town meeting and it would require a supermajority. For the district-wide vote, it's going to require a simple majority. So I just want everybody to be clear on that aspect of it. I don't know. I mean, my preference obviously would be to have it go before town meeting. I'm not sure if that can really be done at this point. I think, people deserve to have a debate before their fellow townspeople and citizens. I'm also not terribly thrilled with the design that's been selected, and I've gone back and forth with Mr. Easley about this. It is, as it is currently being proposed, it does not have an all-weather passageway from the A and B building to the rest of the campus. And I've asked Mr. Easley about this multiple times. At first, he kept telling me that there was one, but there clearly isn't in the diagrams, and he eventually agreed that there was not an all-weather passageway from the A and B building to the rest of the campus. The executive summary of the school build project says that it resolves many ADA compliance concerns and provides an enclosed corridor connection at upper levels. And again, there is no enclosed corridor connection from the A and B building to the rest of the campus. And that does not solve all of the ADA requirements. And just as somebody who has gone to school at Nauset, outside in the winter can be fairly treacherous. And it is much more treacherous for somebody on crutches or in a wheelchair to traverse an open courtyard in the winter. That is the part that I really am not happy about with this design. It would have been a simple addition to add an all-weather corridors even from the upper levels, like the rest of the campus has, that connects the A and B building to building C and the administrative building. And for not to have that is irresponsible. But I will vote for this project, but I will vote for it with serious reservations, just because I do not, we all know the building needs to get updated, but I just wanted to make my concerns known. Thank you.
Okay, I think that, I'm not sure if delving into that sort of issue is really part of the agenda item. And we might be going outside of, I think the discussion here is, and the agenda item is on the election and the election date. And I don't know how far we can veer into the actual design and composition of what.
Yeah.
Of the school. I don't know.
On the agenda item, it says discussion on special election school building project, and how Wellfleet will vote.
Okay, you're right. It does. Okay, that's fine. So, Mr. Easley, would you like to just respond to that?
Certainly. The outdoor hallway that we're speaking of between between AB and the rest of the campus is a covered passageway. So it is covered, but it is not an enclosed passageway. The building will, just by law, will meet all ADA standards. It's required to. We couldn't get a permit without it. We couldn't get this state funding without it. And I appreciate. I appreciate that feedback. It does make logical sense. The trouble at this point in time is that the design is set. We're not allowed to open it back up. We've kind of at that point where, just to be clear, when we began this process, we went out to each of the towns asking them what they would like in their high school. And one of the things that they told us at the Wellfleet Forum, but in each of the towns, was that they liked the open campus, that they liked the layout of the high school. And that was one of the reasons we kept it. In essence, the way the plan is now, 60% of the high school will be kept intact, just gutted down to its skeleton, and 40% will be taken down and rebuilt. And that's the plan. That's the program we've presented forward.
Okay. Helen?
Yeah. So could I please hear from our town moderator, Dan Silverman, before I finish what I need to say?
Yep. Go ahead, Danny.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could maybe bring this discussion back to where it started and with the comments that were made by Jennifer. My understanding, and somebody please correct me if I'm wrong, though, is that the vote on March 30th is simply a vote by the population of the four towns whether or not to approve this project. How the towns individually decide to pay for it is a separate question, and that's one that can be dealt with later on. And I think our town clerk asked, should we have a separate election, special election that would decide that? I guess my feeling is no. Coming back to what Mr. Easley was saying, normally I would be very defensive of town meetings' prerogatives. But in this particular situation where there is a ticking clock and where the uncertainty of whether or not we're going to be able to hold a town meeting in a timely fashion, I understand the rationale that drove the school committee and the building committee to make this decision, and personally I support it. Once that vote is taken, it is then up to the towns individually to decide how they are going to fund the indebtedness for that, and that will be a question that I assume will be on our town meeting warrant and again on our town election following that meeting. My assumption that it would be the approval of a debt exclusion for the life of the borrowing, but again, that's up to the town to decide ultimately. Perhaps Maria or Heather can amplify this, but my understanding is that that's the process going forward, is that the vote on March 30th really is separate. It's a separate approval from the individual votes that the towns are going to have to take, the individual decisions that the towns are going to have to take to how they're going to pay for this project. So thank you.
Yes. Helen, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just want to confirm something to Mr. Easley. Your group decided on a date And 4 towns on that day are going to vote on this, as Danny just told us. Not on the money, but on the project, right? And here's what's not clear to me. By law, do all 4 towns have to vote on the same day?
So the statute that we're working under is, so there are 2 ways to fund these projects. The one, originally we're going to do the town meetings and the 4 town votes. We have moved it to a 1-day election. And so when that's done, just like the tech vote occurred, it occurs in all the 4 towns on all the same day, and the hours of the election are exactly the same in each of those 4 towns. And that's required.
That wasn't my question.
I'm sorry?
Forgive me for interrupting. That was not my question.
I apologize.
Legally, you decided to do that. Does the state require you to do that? To have it be on the same day for all 4 towns? I understand you decided to do that. It was an option. You chose it.
No.
But does the state require?
He's trying to answer.
Yes, I'm sorry. The state, if we hold it in that fashion, the state does require it to be on the same day in all the towns at the same time. Those are the rules governing it. Yes, sorry.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I interrupted, but that was all I wanted to know. Then I have something to say. To take Justina's very good point, when I was saying, when I asked you to be, to clarify that your deadline was May 31st, the reason I wanted to discuss when our town meeting is going to be is simply that, we could meet earlier in May. It wasn't like I thought we should meet on May 30th and then you had to do everything you had to do. So this has all been cleared up, and I appreciate the time you've spent on it. And above all, Danny's information really helped me, because we really, having an election, a ballot election, a special election where we're meeting on, whether to appropriate money or not on a ballot before we've discussed it at town meeting is just wrong. So given that we can have a nice 2/3 vote, yay or nay on this in terms of funding, we may not vote to fund it, right? And then have the election after that. That's kosher to me. That's, that seems like a good public process. And it will have lots of discussion at town meeting because it's a lot of money. So thank you for answering all the questions.
I'm not sure that you got that right, Helen.
Okay, well,
that right.
Easley, through you, Mr. Easley, did I get it right or not? Or Danny?
No, I mean, Dan, would you like to address it, or you want me to address it?
Well, I'm not sure what the implications are for the towns. If the towns vote to approve the project, are they in fact committing to fund it? Then the question is how you come up with that funding. So Helen, you're not quite right. If the towns approve the project, they're approving the funding. How they choose to carry that funding, I guess, is then the question. I wish somebody more expert than me could weigh in on this.
That is correct. I mean, that is so.
Whoa.
When we went before, just so we understand how this process worked. First off, we didn't set the date. We talked with the town administrators and told them that this was the path that looked like the best method forward. It was voted on. We then got the town clerks together from all the 4 towns and asked them what date would be the best date for it. So they're the ones that selected the March 30th date for a bunch of different reasons. One of the reasons, as I understand it, is the COVID rules governing voting expire at the end of March, and they thought they would be extended, but you don't know that. And so in order to move forward in certainty, they wanted to make the date within the current parameters so they would understand what they were dealing with. So that's the first part of that. In this, when we talked with the administrators on this, there was some discussion that they may want to hold both the debt exclusion at the same time the ballot occurs. This is nothing that the towns decide how to pay for it. It's nothing that we can stipulate to them. but it is that option is available since we have a day at the ballot box where everyone will be voting. They can have the debt override at the same time. And as I understand it, at least I'm sorry, from Harry Tarkanian had said that was when the tech vote came up, that as I understand it, in one section, the vote was taken on the tech project, up yea or nay, and in the next room, there was another ballot in which it was voted on the funding for it, and it was done on the same day. That's secondhand, but that was the way I was told that it happened in Wellfleet when the tech vote came down.
Okay. I have Justina, her hand's up, Ryan's hand's still up, and I think I'm going to call on Justina because she hasn't.
Well, I'm very comfortable with this process. Every year, we have a considerable number of our citizens vote on spending articles, and they don't go to town meeting and debate them. This is a project that's been in the news. We have many, many voters with school-aged children who followed the project. It's a project that's been worked on diligently. And again, I'm going to go back to my own experience generations ago when the Nauset was built. It was controversial, it's expensive, but we have to educate our youth. The Nauset plant obviously needs updating and has to get voted on. And there's plenty of precedent for voters voting on spending articles without going through town meeting. We have significant numbers of voters every year skip town meeting and vote on our own Wellfleet spending articles. I think Mr. Easley deserves our support. His committees deserve our support. We should approve this motion and help this worthy project, this once-in-a-generation project, move forward so our students can get educated.
Yeah, thanks, Justina. Ryan?
Yeah, so one of the questions is, do we include the debt exclusion on this election date that's already scheduled? And does that have to be decided today, Chris?
It's your decision, so no, it doesn't have to be. The only question I think would come down to is just the printing of the ballots, if to fit the time frame. We've been trying to, we didn't want to make anybody work extra or overtime or whatever. So we've been trying to be as accommodative as possible, making sure the timing of the town clerks and whatever, getting them the ballot question as fast as possible so that they can print the postcards for the mail-in balloting and the absentee, as well as get the ballots printed.
Okay. So, I mean, my preference would be to have the debt question on how it's being funded debated at town meeting. But I also am wondering what happens in either case, let's say at the ballot box or at town meeting, what happens if the debt exclusion fails?
I can tell you on our part, so there are two separate questions. If the ballot question on the high school passes, the towns are required to fund it. They choose how to.
But what happens if we can't get sufficient votes on how it's funded?
I don't know the answer to that. I do know though that, if the ballot question passes, if the question of building the high school, remodeling and rebuilding the high school passes, the towns are required at that point to fund it.
Basically, it's our problem at that point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking what happens if it's debated multiple times and we're getting nowhere?
Well, it has been debated for about 2 years now.
Yeah, an actual when it's up for vote for the debt. If we do not have, if the debt exclusion fails, and let's say it fails repeatedly, what is the mechanism that provides funding from the town in that instance? So I just don't know. So it's just.
My thought process is that may have been some of the motivation why some of the town administrators had thought that they might want to hold the debt exclusion question at the same time that they held the ballot question on the high school. Just because you had the same voters there, you may not get the same turnout later on and whatever, because they were kind of part and parcel with the same question, then it would be done, be done there at that point in time.
And does that debt exclusion ballot question require a simple majority or a supermajority?
That's a good question. That is not one I have an answer for. I'm sorry.
Dan might know. Dan?
I think I know. I'm not positive. To the first part of the question, what happens if the voters approve the high school project, but then at a town meeting and a special and a town election, a debt exclusion is not approved? The town is still committed to paying for it. It would have to come out of tax revenue if an override or a debt exclusion was not approved. So other town services presumably would suffer because it would have to come out of our budget. It'd have to come out of a different pocket. So that's the strong argument for doing a debt exclusion. The second part of it was what happens if does it require? These would be two separate elections. They would be separate ballots taking place in separate rooms. That's just the way we did it with the tech vote. You go into one room and you vote on the 4-town district-wide election, and then you go into another room and you vote on the town election. If the town is having a one-item ballot, and that would be for a debt exclusion. I believe that anything like that at a ballot only requires a majority vote. It requires a supermajority at town meeting, but I believe it as a town election item, it would only require a majority vote. Again, the town council should be asked on this. The other thing, in terms of deciding whether or not to combine these two into two elections on the same day, you might want to hear from the town clerk in terms of how much lead time she needs to allow people to register to vote, to cast absentee ballots and so forth. There's some statutory requirements about that Jennifer is aware of that I'm not.
Okay. Dan, just a quick question.
Yes.
As far as the town debt exclusion, would that not have to be on the ballot and at town meeting no matter what?
I don't know. I don't know the answer.
I would think it would have to be because it's not part of the district vote. Just like any other debt exclusion. I think even if we voted for it, we'd still have to bring it to town meeting.
That's your. We pay Copeland and Page a whole lot more than you pay me.
Yeah, okay. That's true. Yeah. Okay. Helen, you have your hand up still?
Yes.
Okay.
Waiting patiently, listening and learning. And Justina had a number of very good points about, one of my concerns, of course, would be, has there been enough information about this? Because whatever a vote is, what I really care about is that people know enough about it to make a good vote, right? So I think there has been a lot of coverage of this, and people, particularly people who have children in the system, have been paying attention. The one thing that Justina did not highlight is this. At town meeting, if you go to town meeting, or if you just get your warrant and go to the election after town meeting, you see all the other things, particularly the big ticket things that the town is going to be spending money on. This is a very big ticket item. And voting on it before town meeting, before people see the actual financial context that we're voting to spend a huge amount of money on, is a good way to sell it. That is just a point I want to make, which is one of the reasons I was concerned about the order of these things. The other thing is, so Mr. Easley, let's say you said that if we don't vote on this, at another exchange we've had about this, I asked you a question. If we don't vote to support it, right, and spend the money, I said, so does that mean kids from Wellfleet can't go to Nauset? And you said, you or whoever else was, presenting it at the table, said, of course, they would go. But what I just heard from you is, if we don't vote to spend this money, who will come after us and make us do it? The state? In other words, we really don't have any choice about this if we want to send kids from Wellfleet to Nauset. Is that correct?
Well, no, I mean, so we're a region and we have a regional agreement, and that's the rules that bind us together. And so in that, we all have to kind of follow the rules that we have of that establishment. So in those rules, the elected school committee has the right to address issues like this and come up with solutions. So this is the solution to the problem of an asset owned by the 4 towns that is 50 years old. And we have gone through a 5-year process of developing the solution to that problem. If I want to answer your question entirely, if this ballot question passes, because of your agreement, your regional agreement, I would assume, I'm sorry, I'm not a lawyer, but I would assume the school system would be allowed to acquire the debt. And because of your adherence to the region, the town would in turn also be required to fund the debt. I think that because that's just the nature of the structure of the regional system we're in and the agreements we're under, this is just one of those aspects of that agreement. And so, I mean, the concept at no point in time would be, the only time Wellfleet students would not be allowed in the school is if the region was broken up. And that's not even in the realm of discussion. This is the first time it's ever been discussed that I'm aware of.
Yeah, but what I said was, let's say the town not only votes not to do it in the first place, but also then votes not to spend the money, both those things. Let's say the town doesn't want to do it across the board. I'm not saying this should happen. I'm not saying I'm in support of that. It's just unclear. Yeah.
I have the gist of your question. So just so the parameters around this vote is that it considers the region. So those 4 towns, all the voters of those 4 towns are one population. And so when the vote is tallied at the end of the day on March 30th, if a majority of the people in those 4 towns that voted that day okay the project, we get a majority vote, then the school is okayed. And in turn, those are the rules that we are governed under as a region. So even if it failed in Wellfleet, if the town itself failed to pass the vote, but we obtain a majority in the region, Wellfleet would be required, as would any other town. I mean, if that situation occurred anywhere else.
And
we are working hopefully that will not happen. We hope we plan to communicate. I mean, we are in the start of an informational session that will occur every week for up until the vote occurs, that people can phone in on. We'll be holding Zoom forums, which is something the superintendent can discuss here.
And just to be clear, the DY is a recent example. Sorry.
Excuse me, Ryan.
Hand up. Go ahead, Justin.
Michael, through you to Helen. Helen, I have a quick question for you, and then I'm going to ask if I can call the question. Helen, are you against this school project?
No, I just said I wasn't.
We don't have a question.
Okay.
To Mr. Easy, I just said I wasn't very clearly.
Okay, because I think we're all supportive of it, unless, Helen, you're not. The building's really old. Okay, so could we call the question?
We don't have a question.
Oh.
We actually don't have any action on this. We can just move on.
Can we? Does Chris Easley need our decision?
The debt exclusion question.
That is one of the questions that's out there for you. I mean, so I'm sorry, when we got on, when it was requested that we come to speak to you, I apologize. I asked for the agenda item to be broadened because Tom, the superintendent, was available. It was so that we could have a broader discussion of education and so forth. I know we have gotten, and in my statement probably directed us that way, that we got caught up in the minutia of stuff around it. But I mean, what we're here for is that we're excited about the education, and we're excited about the impact that a new building that's with 36.6 million of state funding will provide us. Education has changed drastically in 50 years, and in turn, we need a building for current educational standards to proceed forward and continue the quality education we have in this area.
Okay, to that end, I'd like to hear from Tom Conrad before we move on. I'd like to speak. Sorry.
He's a patient man.
It's certainly been an interesting discussion to listen to.
Okay.
First of all, I can appreciate having a couple of members here tonight that graduated from Nauset Regional High School, and they know the campus as well as anyone in terms of what it brings to the learning experience and also how tired that campus is. And one of the things that I've taken as I've traveled throughout the district to lots and lots of meetings, I've rarely run into anyone who felt that campus didn't need great attention. It has served us very well, and now it's time to find the solution to the four communities supporting this project going forward. The one piece that I also want to share with you, and Chris just mentioned a couple of things about it, we think it's very, very important that we move forward with question and answer Zoom meetings. And for some of you that maybe were watching over the summer, it was an approach that we took as we tried to figure out how to reopen our schools and what plans we were going to be going with in terms of those opening days. So we're really planning on Wednesdays, each Wednesday until we take the vote, of having at least an hour to an hour and 15-minute meetings where we'll discuss some part of the project. Some of the things that we're looking at is making sure that the voters understand from recapping the very beginning, very similar to what Chris was talking with you about, and up until the vote for March 30th. We also are interested in making sure that people understand that we went through a rigorous process at looking at a variety of other options that weren't chosen, and so that you understand the depth of the study. We're also, when we first got into this program and being selected by the MSBA, they constantly wanted us in our educational vision and planning for this project was to look out to 2050 in terms of what education we'll look at that point. And we'll be discussing that in some of these Zoom meetings. And then we're also interested in rolling out a visual of the campus that we are planning for, and highlighting some of the areas that have been of great concern to the citizens in our four towns. I can tell you one, for instance, is the security of the campus. And before the virus hit us, it was probably the hottest topic by parents and community members, and we're going to be able to highlight those changes. And then we're certainly wanting to make sure that we talk about the vote and how it's going to be handled, as we have done here tonight. So we'll be sending something to each of the members on the select boards and the FinComs to make sure that they are getting up-to-date information in terms of upcoming initiatives by us. And we look forward to having this robust conversation continue in these venues going forward. So I'm very, very excited about the possibilities.
Okay, Ryan, you got one more thing?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have three options right now. And I'm just wondering if we should make a motion for one or the other. One is to include the debt exclusion on the March 30th ballot. Second is to have the debt exclusion go before town meeting and to have it on the ballot after town meeting. And three is basically to put off the decision for 2 weeks until our next meeting to have an opinion from KP Law to answer if it's a supermajority or a regular majority or any other outstanding questions related to the debt exclusion.
Ryan, I would say, that really the only option is the third option because we don't know if this has to come before town meeting, if it goes on that ballot. I assume that it does have to go both onto the ballot and at town meeting. And if that is the case, then I would obviously prefer that it goes to town meeting first and then on the ballot as we typically do things so that debate can occur in the public square about how to fund this if it passes. In other words, if it doesn't pass this on March 30th, then it's a moot point about how to fund it. I would say that I would like to hear from town council before we move forward.
Yep, I would agree with that. And then the only thing is how much lead time does Jennifer require?
And that's what we need to find out from Jennifer. Is she still on?
And so basically that also means that we need an opinion by a certain time, and that if we're getting close, we'll have to have time to call a meeting.
But we should have plenty of time right now. I mean, I think, Jennifer, why don't you weigh in right now if you're here?
I think we have time to wait till the next meeting.
Okay.
And how much lead time do you need, Jennifer?
I would like as much as we can get. There will be a postcard mailing going out for the district-wide vote. I think it's February 15th, and those will go to print beforehand. But I can make some adjustments. In other words, I can have a postcard just made out for Wellfleet, and I can have it say, allude to all elections into 2021 so that we cover our bases, whether we have a special town election on the same day as the district-wide vote or if we hold it off to a later date.
Okay.
Mike?
Yep.
I believe it's 2/3 at town meeting and majority at the ballot, having gone through this kind of thing a couple of times. Mr. Easley has made it very clear, and I didn't have it clear in my head, which is why I asked about it. It doesn't matter if we vote against it in this special election in March. If the rest of the people in the 4 schools, the 4 towns vote for it, it passes.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how Wellfleet passes. And all we have to decide at town meeting is how do we want to pay for it? So that is not, I believe, but yeah, I agree with that. We need to hear from town council. But I believe that simply determining how we're going to pay for it, not if, because we will have to if all the people in the towns, other people in the towns vote for it.
That's true. So I would take no action and move on from this topic if that's possible.
Yes, because the last point is we might have to pay for it in a certain way, given our options. Thank you.
Okay. All right. That's it, I think, from everyone. Great. Thank you, Tom. And
thank you
Chris.
very much.
Appreciate it.
Can I just close with one thing?
Yes, please.
I'm sorry. I know we've taken a lot of your time, and I appreciate.
No, that's fine.
We've taken a lot of your time.
Yeah.
I understand that these are challenges, and and communication's harder in the age of COVID, and those things. We one of the key points is understanding that we have a problem And what's coming before the voters is a solution. This solution isn't something was pulled out of a rabbit's hat. This is something that's been worked on for 5 years and by members of all our communities. And so you hate to take, we have good stuff. There's a lot of good energy that's gone into this. The school and the design of the school is dynamic and it's important. I mean, this is a positive thing for our communities. In turn, just for informational purposes, if you go to the high school website, you can click on the building program and it will take you to the building project website. There is, if you have the time, there's information there. There is every meeting, all the agendas, there's videos, there's a ton of information for people. And in turn, we are going to work hard to make sure that we continue a flow of information out to the voters from this up until Election Day. So thank you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on here, we've got the town meeting date. So, Dan, you still here?
I'm still here.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to try to be very quick here. I think, a year ago, none of us would have thought that coming up this spring, we're still going to be dealing with COVID. But given the current situation, given the uncertainties, my suggestion to the board at this time, or my recommendation, I guess, would be that you take a similar tack that you took last year and delay setting the date of town meeting as long as possible. Given that we don't know how quickly this vaccine is going to be rolling out. It looks like it's not anywhere near as fast as most of us would like it. I think by April, it's almost certain that not enough of the population is going to have been vaccinated for us to feel comfortable going to an indoor meeting. And if we do an outdoor meeting again, I think we have a very good template in place for how to do that. Basically take what we learned from last year, take those plans off the shelf, dust them off, take the lessons learned and go forward from that. My suggestion to the board is that you tentatively set June 5th, I believe is the date, Saturday, June 5th, as the date for town meeting. I think trying to do it earlier, given what spring on Cape Cod is like, I think we take more of a chance with the weather. And then the other possibility is maybe by June we can do an indoor meeting. I'm skeptical that we'll be able to, but if we're going to do an outdoor meeting, I'd like to try to do it as late in the spring as possible. So June 5th is the Saturday following Memorial Day. There's still plenty of time in the rest of the month for Jennifer to run the town election that she needs to and set a date for that. And yet it still gets us our budget and our town meeting well before the fiscal year changes over on July 1st. So my recommendation right now would be to tentatively hold June 5th as the date for town meeting. The one other thing that I wanted to say, and Mia Baumgarten is on the call, and just some of this was Mia's prodding, that the earlier we set the date and decide on something, the more likely it is that we're not going to find ourselves at the short end of competing for the resources necessary, whether it's folding chairs, tents, sound systems, and so forth. I think many of the towns who have seen how well outdoor town meetings work are going to be looking to do it again in late spring. I know Provincetown has already set their date sometime in May, but again, given where we are and so forth, I'd be more comfortable with June 5th. Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking June also, but I just had heard that, and I'm not sure where I got this information. So if anybody knows this for sure, but that the COVID rules pertaining to town meetings actually expire, and that in order to move the town meeting date, it's a different process than we used last year. Is that correct or not?
Not quite, Mike. The process would be different if a date was set and then you have to change it after the date had been set. There was an emergency provision that allows the moderator and consultation with public safety officials to change the date once it has been set. but our charter gives us, or gives you rather, the latitude to set the date of town meeting. It calls for it to be the fourth Monday in April or any other date chosen by the select board. And that was the process that the board used last year. Because our charter does not pin us to a specific date, you have the latitude to choose a different date. And until the date is set, there's no need to change it. The COVID rules have absolutely nothing to do with it. The only thing you need is that I think we decided last week it was about a 5 to a 6 week lead time in order to get the warrants printed and everything and mailed out and so forth. I believe 5 weeks was kind of the drop dead date that Dan Hort told us about last year. So as long as you don't set the date, there's no other process that needs to happen.
Okay. So I agree with a tentative June meeting. That's what I was thinking as well. I think as far as weather and the amount of time that we'd need before we're in full season here in full swing, that the first week of June is probably a good tentative date to set. So I'm on board with that. I've got a couple board members here. Helen.
Yes, Danny, that is exactly the day I hoped we would do it. And I just want to remind everybody how queasy it was last year. And in terms of getting the warrants set and getting the departments together, having it be undecided for so much time, like we all thought with magic thinking that somehow it could happen normally. What we know now is it may not. And we also may have another surge because of the new strains of the virus, or we may not. The vaccines may or may not be effective for every strain of the virus that mutates, or they may be. People may decide not to get vaccinated, and we may not get vaccinated in time. So what I suggest is we make up our minds, we commit to it, and then just proceed in a relaxed, normal way to a date that's farther along than we usually do. And I think it'll all work out, and that we do it outdoors and we do it on a Saturday, because not only did it work out last fall, but it was pleasant and people showed up. And it was great, actually. How many people, that said something as we were all going away, and later, how many people I heard from that said, why don't we do it like this? It's great. It starts during the day, there'll be enough daylight, and let's just make up our minds and do it and have things be much easier because of that.
Okay.
I don't think we'll have to change our mind. So Danny and I didn't talk about this ahead of time. I just looked at the calendar, thought about the weather, like Justina and Mike and me and Ryan. We all grew up here. And, first week in June, people will have gotten themselves together, Memorial Day, all those things. Let's just do it. Thank you.
Ryan?
I'm pretty much going to echo Helen. I think that we should just plan for it on June 5th. Plan for it to be outdoors. There's the plan. I don't really want to be in a situation where we're debating between an outdoor or indoor based on how rapidly a vaccine is rolled out to the general populace. We know that even in the middle of summer, there's going to be a segment of the population that haven't been vaccinated. So I think we should just plan for it to be outdoors and say June 5th with multiple rain dates as the plan.
Yep. Okay. I'm on board with that also. I think it's probably a good idea to just set that date so we can actually start the planning process. And there is a procedure to change it if we had to, but if we set some rain dates, I think that'll give us a little latitude. That way, if there's some kind of storm heading our way or whatever, there's some latitude there. Chief Hurley's on here, so I'm gonna.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, just a quick question. I want to make sure, because I have not seen any paperwork nor have signed off, but one of our major triathlon events during a normal year is looking at their website is advertising a triathlon on June 5th, which of course is in that area. I have not seen anything nor signed off on anything, but just want to make sure that nobody else has or discussed it.
Which, can I ask which one it is?
It's the Wellfleet Sprint Triathlon that WOMR puts on.
Yeah.
It's quite a large event that takes up that whole area with road closures. Again, I have not seen any paperwork, and it's almost the beginning of February. And if they're advertising it without any town approval,
No, they're not. So I just got an email today from OMR asking what do you think will happen? And I would think that they would be amenable to doing it the following weekend, but that's a good point. And we haven't even discussed use of town property yet. But I would think they'd be, last year they were amenable to postpone it until the fall. So I think they would do it the second week in June.
Well, yeah, I don't think
I want to decide about that.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't base our town meeting on whether triathlon wants to do something.
I just want to make sure that no one's committed. I
don't think that we haven't given any permission for them to do that. So, I think we should still proceed. And if they come before us, that's, if the town meeting date set that date, then we just say, hey, it's not a good date to do it. So, Helen?
Yes on what Janet said. Janet, I'm glad you got some communication from them. And we based our limitations on events like that last spring going into last summer on what was actually on the ground. And I want to remind everybody, we don't know what's going to be going on with this.
Right. So do we need to vote or anything on this?
Hold on. We do know that we can have town meetings safely the way we did it in September. And so that I can commit to, but it's very much more supervised than an event like that with people sweaty and, other people being in their drafts.
Order, Helen, that's just off topic. We're not going to delve into the triathlon.
Right. But I'm comparing decisions about the two, so I'm agreeing with Janet. Thank you.
Okay. That sounds good. Danny Silverman?
Yeah, I think the question was, do you need to vote on this? You don't need to set the date legally until you close the warrant and set the date, but I think it would be helpful to Mia, to me, to the town department heads, Chief Pauly, Chief Hurley, and so forth, and the DPW most of all probably, to say, yes, this is the date that we're going to do it, so that we can begin the planning process. It took us from basically June until September last year, and it'd be nice to have it a little more leisurely, I guess. So I don't think we need a vote as much as we need a commitment from the select board that yes, this will be the date, and go forth and plan.
Yeah, I agree. I think we could vote on setting a tentative date of June 5th.
Do we want to set the rain dates?
Yes.
Not at this point.
Well, wait a minute. Question.
We're not setting the date. According to Danny, we can just make a tentative agreement. We can make an agreement without voting on it. Do we all agree that we want to do it on June, what is it, 5th or 6th? And then we have up until we want to actually set that date that's necessary, or we feel confident that that's what we want to do, but everyone can start planning to proceed as if we are going to do it on that date. That said, I would prefer to do it that way just because we don't box ourselves in, but we still are setting a date, but it's not voted and committed on paper where we have a procedure to follow to change it. Should something come up, I don't know. I think I think just sort of calling the question of whether we all agree on it without actually making a motion, setting that date is probably a good idea.
Good. Shall we do that?
I think Chief Hurley has his hand up right now. I'm just gonna.
Yeah, and so does Helen.
No, that was before. Sorry, that was from before.
Okay, go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, no, I think we should set the date now, because if it's not set, then if I were a department head, I'd say, well, yeah, they all think it's a good idea, but they haven't decided yet. I would like to decide tonight and stick to it. And I have a question through you, Mike, to Danny. What is the language for, or is there some special procedure for setting a rain date when we set the proposed date for the town meeting? In other words, what would the language in a motion be?
I don't know the answer to that, but again, setting if you're voting tonight to set the date, it's not the same as putting the date in the verbiage of the warrant. Once you put it in the verbiage of the warrant, it's a legal document. Voting to set it tonight says, yes, okay, we know we're going to do it on this date, but it does not have the same legal statutory requirements that putting in a warrant does. At some point, you're going to need to set the date in the warrant. And I think at that point is when you would need to include the rain dates in it. We did not last year and we got away with it. But I think if you're going to advertise the warrant, it ought to include the rain dates in the legal language of the warrant. But if you want to vote to set the date tonight, that's fine. That's not the same as committing yourselves by closing the warrant with a date on it.
Yes, see, Mike, yes, that's when the procedure that you'd have to do would become necessary.
Right.
What we would be doing by voting on a definite date tonight would be to give the departments and everybody else peace of mind.
Exactly.
And Andy say exactly. Thank you. So I would like to move to set the date for June 5th, Saturday, June 5th, 2021. And that.
Second.
There was a second. Okay.
Okay. That's fine with me, as long as we're not committing it onto the warrant. As long as we're not committing it to the point where we unnecessarily box ourselves in.
I think you're fine.
Yeah. Okay.
I agree. I'm all for it.
So, roll call vote then.
Janet, aye.
Justina, aye.
Ryan, aye.
Michael, aye.
Ellen, aye.
Okay, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. On here we got Open Space Committee's charge and purview. Ryan, ready to talk to someone on that?
Yes. So I talked to the chair of Open Space and Denny O'Connell as well. And the just out of respect of the volunteers, they would like to be present if we discuss this. So I think out of respect for them and Bruce Herter, the chair of the Open Space, I would like to postpone this discussion to a later meeting.
Okay.
Okay, that sounds fine to me. So now we have the Fleet Fund update. Dan, back on.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very quickly, the Fleet Fund asked to come before you just to kind of give you an update on where we are, and maybe a quick overview for those who might be watching who haven't yet learned about the Fleet Fund. I'm going to turn this over to our president very quickly, but first let me just mention that we do have a number of our officers on the call. We have Paula Erickson, who's the president. I'm the vice president. Elaine McElroy, our clerk, is in the meeting. Nancy Winslow, who is our client liaison, is in the meeting. Claudia Crozen, sorry, Claudia, is our assistant client liaison, and
hours, which provides a beautiful continuity for how we work and how the fund works. And just to briefly explain that so everyone's clear, we partner with other social service organizations and agencies, not other, but other agencies, schools, churches, any local organization that really understands and knows the needs of its constituents, basically, to provide this this very flexible, confidential, and pretty immediate source of funding. So it's important to know that someone doesn't come directly to the Fleet Fund for assistance, but rather, and you can see this, the list of partner organizations on our website, which is thefleetfund.org, but that someone needs to go to such an organization for sort of wraparound support. And through that organization, we are here to kind of close the gap when it's needed, in terms of needing support for anything from medical care, housing costs, costs for food, transportation, a car repair. Those are just some examples. So the other thing that I think is good to know about us is that we also have, in addition to a board of 10, we have what we call our ambassadors, Fleet Fund ambassadors, and those are community members who are very engaged in various ways with different segments of the population, so that they can help us sort of spread the mission and share information about the fund throughout the community. So we put this together, certainly in response kind of to the pandemic or because of the pandemic, but many of us who are on the board who work in capacities, helping capacities, or have served the town in various ways, know that the need that we're serving is not new. It exists always. So that's it. Happy to take questions. Happy for Dan or any of the other board members to fill in what I might have left out.
Let me just expand just a little bit, or not expand, but bring the board up to date. I know that I believe you got the press release that we sent out when we first went public. Our fundraising strategy, we got some very good advice from the sister of somebody who's on our board and has lived in town, for a family that's been in town for many years. We went out and we found some foundational donors who helped us get off the ground. We then went public with our fundraising campaign. Wellfleet, both year-round residents, part-time residents, and even non-residents, friends of ours from elsewhere, have been very generous. We hit our first fundraising target relatively quickly. I believe right now we're at about $90,000 that we've managed to raise. We had an initial goal ultimately of trying to get to 150,000. We've already begun to answer calls for assistance that have come to us through the other social service agencies that Paula was talking about. And we want to make people know that the fund is out there. That's part of why we're coming before the board, is we want people who need help to know that they can go to the Housing Assistance Council, the the partnership, helping our women, the churches, the schools. Any of these organizations can bring somebody to us, and we will partner with them to try to fill in the funding gaps. As Paula said, there's lots, anything from, really what might seem minor to you. Somebody needs their car repair. If they can't get their car fixed, they can't get to work. If they can't get to work, they can't pay their rent. And this is cascading series of events that we're trying to help out with. So that's our mission, and we hope we are successful with it going forward.
Okay, yeah, this is something that first came up in the needs committee meetings that we were having, and it's really just great that this is happening, and it's really timely, and that part of that sort of committee was really just about assessing how much need there was out there. And it was kind of hard to tell, because the mechanism for outreach and was sort of scattered throughout different agencies and communities. And so it's just really great that there's actually this fund now, which can sort of be utilized for various different services and different needs that can sort of be coordinated around. So I'm really glad you guys did this, and it's just we're lucky to have it, and lucky to have this kind of community.
Thanks so much, Michael. And I meant to give you a nod for running those Wellfleet needs groups where this did first come up, and be careful about what you bring up in a group, because next thing you know, you become Madam President of it. So, but yeah, feels productive.
It's great. Justina?
Yeah, I really moved to hear all this, and I think that community is an overused term, but this is one of the things that makes our town so strong. And a lot of times people are so scared to get help. It takes a lot of courage to ask for help, and I'll certainly be spreading the word. I've already jotted down a couple of names, and I think as we become an affluent town, these are the kinds of things that the affluent can really help with those that perhaps are in a different social situation, and it helps us stay diverse, and it helps those who, people really maybe are turning the heat down too hard. They're afraid to put gas in their car at $5 and $10 a time, and so forth. So I really applaud everybody on the fleet and everybody out there who's chipping in to help. These things snowball too. Someone hears about the fleet and they think, gee, what could I do to help? So thank you guys, and I'll be spreading the word, and I really appreciate everybody's name associated with it.
I think we want to thank the board for the support, and more than anything else, we want to thank the people of Wellfleet, who've come forward to make this a reality. I think it was definitely a vision this summer, and it very quickly came together. The other thing I just want to mention with the web address again, it's Darren Waterspoon, one of our board members, put together a really very informative, very user-friendly website, both for people who want to help and for people who might be looking for help. So that address, again, is thefleetfund.org. There's a tremendous amount of information there, and I'd recommend that everybody take a look at that. And if you know somebody that's looking for help, please send them to that. If you know somebody that would like to join us in being helpers, you can send them there as well. Thank you.
Well, in the old days, we were that kind of community, but going back a number of generations way back, and hopefully we can stay that way.
Justine, I want to read something from our website that I think speaks to what you're talking about.
Thank you.
So this is right from our website, and I'll leave you with this thought. And it's, the Fleet Fund is for the people of Wellfleet, by the people of Wellfleet. We believe our community is strongest when we come together in respect embracing what we can learn from each other. We believe we build community and defend against injustice and inequity right here at home by extending help to our neighbors so that all Wellfleet residents feel they belong and are valued members of our community. Just an example of kind of what has moved us and why we're putting lots of time and energy toward this. And I think why the town is also showing up in such a big way to support the project. So
very inspiring.
Thank you.
And sometimes it's those in need that teach those of us who are not financially in need.
That's right. We talk about how the Fleet Fund is a link between people who between those who can offer help and those who need it, recognizing that role can be reversed at any time.
So true.
Yeah, I think it's easy in a resort town to sort of for people to overlook the need that exists in it because I just growing up on Cape Cod, I traveled around a lot, and when I would tell people I was from Cape Cod or from Wellfleet, people go, "Oh, you must have money to live out there." Well, that wasn't the case, and it's still not the case for a lot of people in this town. And it's easy as someone who comes here or rents here or has a second home to sort of not notice the fact that there is a lot of poverty on Cape Cod and in Wellfleet as well. So this is a really important fund. And
it looks like $90,000 worth of people noticed. So I want to thank every donor. I'm really heartened by the heart of people who come to our town.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Paula. Thank you, Dan, and everyone else involved in the Fleet Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Harbor dredging update and lobbyist proposal review. Is Joe Aberdale on?
I am.
Hey, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I'd like to begin by providing a quick update on our dredging project, which is now the largest ongoing dredging project in the state. Channel, as we know, is done. That was fully funded by Congress. Recently, some dredging was done in the fuel dock and launching ramp areas, and that resulted in a savings to the town because the contractor who was dredging the channel went over a little bit into the footprint area. We had to dredge around the fuel dock. That results in a savings to the town of $364,800. The rest of that area, Area 1, from the launching ramp around the pier, including all of the slip areas, will be completed starting on October 1st. The issue tonight is Area 2, the mooring field. We need to do maintenance dredging there. The state has issued a permit to us a few years back. The federal permit is now needed and is not issued. The Army Corps of Engineers has to issue that permit, and therein lies the problem. Their process involves soliciting recommendations from various federal agencies before they will sign off on the permit. Agencies, environmental, water quality, fisheries. One agency is objecting. That's the National Marine Fisheries Service. Their position is this is not an active mooring field. That while we want to do maintenance dredging, they're saying, no, you're attempting to do improvement dredging. We are being penalized because they have a 50-year rule. The last time that area was dredged was in 1957. So now they are declaring it a beneficial mudflat. In order to get their sign off, they are saying that the town has to pay them, that agency, a mitigation fee according to their formula, which is $14 a square foot. And that comes out to $13.5 million. If they agreed with us to classify the mooring field as maintenance dredging and not improvement dredging, they get nothing. Several years back, when we were working on securing the state permits, there was one state agency that objected, the Endangered Species Agency. Their objection was based on the presence of the diamondback turtles in the harbor. We were able to have a seat at the table with that agency, entered into a negotiation after presenting our case, and we came to a resolution. The permit was subsequently issued. The Army Corps' position is, with an agency like National Marine Fisheries that are objecting, they do not have to accept that agency's recommendation, but they have told us that in this case, they are going to. We cannot have a seat at the table to negotiate directly with National Marine Fisheries Service. We are prohibited by the Army Corps of Engineers from doing that. The Army Corps of Engineers has established the following rule for the town to negotiate. We have to state our case to our engineers, GEI, who then states it to the Army Corps of Engineers, who then states it to National Marine Fisheries. Our engineers are prohibited from speaking directly to National Marine Fisheries. Our position has been one that objects to the National Marine Fisheries Service position that the area cannot continue to be a viable mooring field, even though it has been so forever. But we have no way of contesting that or even stating our case because the Army Corps will not let us talk directly to National Marine Fisheries. We think that if we can't deal directly with National Marine Fisheries Service and that effort fails, only then should we consider mitigation of some sort. Last October, we requested from the Army Corps and National Marine Fisheries possible guidelines if we have to enter mitigation with them. We have yet to receive those. You have before you the proposal and the contract from the lobbyist. This is the lobbyist with whom we've had a 5-year relationship, who did our work last time securing the $5 million in federal funds for the channel. He does a lot of work nationally on dredging and permitting issues. Through the past 5 years, he has periodically offered us advice, many times at no cost to us. Wellfleet hired him to secure the $5 million for the channel. As soon as we did that, he opened doors in Washington, D.C. to the top command at the Army Corps of Engineers and to people in the White House Office of Management and Budget, and allowed us to give presentations to them. He garnered strong support from our congressional delegation. Without his work, I don't believe we would have secured that $5 million funding for the channel. I discovered and recruited him and developed a relationship over those 5 years, and have found him to be very credible, reliable, with good communication every step of the way. I had a consultation with him recently and presented it to the dredging task force. He believes the Army Corps and National Marine Fisheries position is outrageous, that we should be able to deal directly with them to present our case. Getting permits in this project secured is more challenging than getting funding the last time around. Federal agencies are more difficult to deal with than state agency. There are more layers of bureaucracy. The Army Corps regional offices, he states, have a lot of autonomy and discretion, and some are more difficult to deal with than others. We need to get access and to reach an agreement. He feels we have some positives going for us. One, we have a long-established mooring field. That's obvious. The state saw fit to enter into negotiations with us and issue a permit. Our engineers are on record as recommending to the town and to the Army Corps that maintenance dredging proceed. They have done their core samples, they have done their studies, and they have stated to the Army Corps they don't see any problem with our continuing using it as a mooring field, that it would cause no harm to the environment. He also feels a benefit we have is our record of successful dredging accomplishments to date. We also have established a very positive relationship with our congressional delegation on Wellfleet dredging. He proposes strategy to start with access to the top command at the Army Corps of Engineers in Washington, D.C. for a presentation, and to begin working immediately with our congressional delegation. He noted that the heads of the National Marine Fisheries Service and the Assistant Secretary of the Army, who oversees the Army Corps, they are going to be new presidential appointments to be made soon. That's in our favor. These people are beholden to Congress and will work with our congressional delegation and the top Army Corps engineer people. We presented this to the Dredging Task Force. They voted unanimously to recommend that the proposal be accepted and that the contract be funded. There's a great deal of time and work that has gone into this, and I want to assure you that we have explored every possible avenue to basically come to an agreement with these people and have been unable to do so. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Anyone from the board? Helen?
So, through you, Joe, two questions. Right at the beginning, you mentioned what the range of concerns were for the National Marine Fisheries Agency. And you also said just now that the Marine Advisory Board had, tried every which way to figure out how to work with this objection. So what everybody at this meeting or at this table knows, and what you know, is that the sediment in the harbor affects a fishery. So my question to you, because it comes off it onto shellfish beds, and this is a very documented effect. In other words, the mooring basin is right next to shellfish habitat, big time. And are shellfish not considered fish by this agency? Is the effect on them not considered important? In other words, this area is the source of real harm to shellfish habitat. And it will continue to be so, and we're offering to do maintenance dredging. And so was that brought up? My question, clearing the dust off what I just said, is, does this agency not consider shellfish to be fish?
I don't know that because they won't talk with us. But I think what is significant here is that dredging today is not like dredging when we last did it in 2002. It is high-tech, highly advanced, using GPS, and they're pretty accurate to the foot, okay? So we had to go through a process, working with our engineers, working with the state, to provide them with information and procedures that would be followed that would ensure that there would be no damage to those beds. And the state rules are quite strict, and they finally signed off on it.
That wasn't my question. Right now, but that's good to know. But right now, what is coming off that area contributes to something which makes our shell fishery not in as good shape as it needs to be. In other words, it's hurting it and it's mounting up. So it isn't what dredging it would do while it was going on. It's what's going to happen if there is no dredging. That was my point more.
Oh, I understand now. 4 years ago, the state did a study. They found that one of the major threats to the shellfish area is not Vibrio or other diseases, but the encroachment of the mayonnaise. And there was a strong recommendation that the only way that could be stopped is to dredge. That encroachment is caused by the lack of dredging.
Yes. So why is this not, given that they're supposed to think about harm to the fisheries unless they don't consider shellfish to be fish, right? Why is that not? I mean, is this some kind of power game involving, I don't want to go there. It doesn't sound good to me, but thank you, Joe. I would be supportive of this lobbyist because we got, Janet is aware or more aware even than I am because we were there when he came on and he has helped and we did get bang for our buck. And what was the buck? How much did we end up paying him over 5 years, please?
$17,000.
17.
Oh, well, 17000.
Yes.
That sounds well worth it.
$49.
Yeah, that sounds like a good return on investment. Justina?
Yeah, like Helen, I support this. I think that, there's a place for professionals. When I buy a piece of property, I have a lawyer. God forbid if I got in trouble, I'd need a lawyer. And if the town of Wellfleet needs representation to get our voice heard with federal agencies, it only makes sense that we'd hire a professional. Not only that, we, thanks to the good offices of the Marina Advisory Committee, we can hire a proven quantity here that Joe's here today to tell us about. So I think we're lucky to be able to sign this contract. I enjoyed hearing about it, and like Helen, I support it.
Can we call the question since it seems like everyone's in agreement? I don't think we need to talk about it forever.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yep.
I just want to ask what the source of the funding would be.
Cash. Cash you find, Maria. You told us that the accounting department's under control. We have no cash flow problems. We have a good new accountant, right?
We do, but I'm not sure that there's an appropriation for this. That's why I asked.
There isn't.
There's no appropriation, so it would.
Well, hold on. So
unless we appropriated at town meeting.
We did appropriate $7 million 2 years ago in April for for the funding of the
dredging
Inner Harbor, and that was also known then that it wasn't going to be enough because we never got a price on it. So yes, I don't know where the money is. It's on some line somewhere, but yes, we did appropriate it. We did approve it.
There's also supposed to be an additional amount for contract services. I mean, we'll have to go and find it, but there should be 25,000.
Yeah, there's just to look ahead a bit. There's going to be money available from the state for a dredging award, and we are in the process of looking at the grant application and getting ready to submit that. So that will supplement the amount of money that the town will have to pay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this would have to go to, I don't think that there's money already allocated for this.
There isn't.
It was approved at town meeting.
I think that was for the dredging.
But that was the dredging. We looked at the article today just to make sure that, we weren't going sideways with it. But what was approved for the dredging didn't necessarily have broad enough language to approve including this out of that funding. So that's the reason I bring it up. I mean, we can take it from somebody's line item, but it doesn't exist as it is written right now.
Well, let's approve it and then go hunt for the money.
Could it come out of the Marina Enterprise Fund?
Depends on how that's written.
Yeah.
It depends on how the Marina Enterprise Fund is set up.
They would have to allocate it.
Yep.
I don't think we can't just grab from it.
Right.
Can we approve it contingent upon location of the funding?
That's what I would recommend. I mean, Heather and I have been sort of scratching our heads about this and trying to look to see, whether there was latitude in something else. I mean, Heather's welcome to chime in here, but
when does the contract have to start?
Or is this something that you're looking at to be proposed in the upcoming budget? Is it what's the slack in the time frame if this gets approved starting in July compared to if this gets approved starting next month?
Janet's hands up. Maybe she remembers something from the.
No, I forgot to lower it again.
Janet, do you remember from the town meeting appropriation?
Well, Maria just said that it's according to the wording, something like this isn't included in it. So
well, maybe somebody else wouldn't read it the same way.
When we funded the lobbyist last time, where did the funding come from?
It was, hello?
Go ahead, Helen.
Yeah, my memory is it was just like it is tonight. It was a separate decision. It wasn't, as Maria said, I didn't reread the article, but my memory is that was for everything to do physically with the dredging. And my memory is also that the vote was like it is tonight, specifically to hire this person to be a lobbyist. It's a separate issue. I just want to say in terms of finding where the money go, where to get the money, it might be a supportive thing to our case in Washington, to this fisheries agency, to have some of the money, Nancy Chavetta will kill me, but to have some of the money coming from something shellfish. In other words, should it be a grant? Should it be whatever? Because it really does affect the shellfish habitat, what's coming off that area. And to have it come maybe from Marina, maybe from shellfish, shave a little money off here, shave a little money off there, see where it goes, rummage around, and Justina put it very well. Let's vote on it and then find the money and get the guy started as soon as we can, and maybe have a transfer that has to go through the FinCom, I don't think we have to, then we can cover it at town meeting. When should it start through you, Mike, to Joe? In other words, what happens if we don't find the money this week? You know what I mean?
Shall we assume that you're going to want to have it approved by town council?
town meeting or town council?
No, the town council.
The contract.
The contract, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The start date.
So we need to start it as quickly as possible. And just one other thought, part of the strategy discussion that I had with this lobbyist was that part of his presentation will be the state study that I referred to about the threat, the encroachment of the black mayonnaise on the shellfish beds and how important that is. He thinks we can get good mileage out of that.
I've got Will Sullivan and Chief Polly on here. We'll call on Will first because the Marina Enterprise Fund was brought up. And then Chief Polly, maybe we can get a little insight. Go ahead, Will.
Hi, I can tell you, as far as I know, we don't have the money in the enterprise fund budget right now for this. That being one thing. But I would also ask that we do have a meeting. Our engineer has set up a conference call with the Army Corps of Engineers, Norm Ferris, who is handling this permit, to find out exactly what the demands are on February 5th. So if we could go into that with that information, I think we'd be one step ahead of the game.
Yeah, with reference to that upcoming conference call, Army Corps has made it clear that that is only to plead our case to the Army Corps. They are not going to involve National Marine Fisheries nor bring back any guidelines from them. That's an opportunity, a one-time opportunity so far to present our case only to the Army Corps. So we need to get the lobbyists going as soon as possible.
Okay, Rich Polly, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief. This is a critical public safety issue. It continues to be, to make sure that we have the dredging done and the maintenance dredging done. Clearly, we're talking $17,000 here. If you want, if you can't, you got to be able to grab it out of a $23 million budget somewhere. And I would say if it doesn't come out of a combination of the, Marina budget, I say a combination, the Marina budget, the shellfish budget, and even the fire department budget, and just go back around the loop and get it recouped at town meeting. I mean, it's as simple as that, with all the respect.
Yeah, and I agree with the chief. I mean, procedurally good that you vote on it, but, I didn't know if you had a sense of where the funding came from the last time you hired a lobbyist, and, we'd be happy to poke around in everybody's budget to see where we can sort of rob Peter to pay Paul, but, good.
Can we make a loan from the general fund?
Heather and I have to talk about that because they still has to come out of somebody's line item.
Well, we had all that money come back from CARES Act. We didn't have the porta potties. Like, we're in good shape. So,
but the CARES Act funding was for things that were not already approved in a budget.
That's correct. But then we didn't need to utilize the borrowing. We didn't need to borrow from the general fund for cash flow emergency and so forth. So we have more cash flow leeway, as your report states. So I think I agree with Chief Polly. We have a $22 million budget, and it's not stretched in some of the cash flow problems we earlier this year thought we'd have. So we have it. It's just a question of jiggering it. Like, I think, Maria, you probably agree. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, you're right. It's gonna come out of somebody's appropriated budget. There's no
get it back
budget for money that's not in some department's line item or some enterprise fund's line item.
Well, there's 900,000 in the general fund. Can't we borrow from there? That's nobody's budget.
From which fund?
There's the undesignated general. I mean, there's line items that aren't people's general fund that it can be borrowed from. That we were going to borrow from the cash. Anyways, I don't want to take everybody's time up. I think we have to
look into it,
and we'll
be happy to look into it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Chief, do you have your hand up still, or is that just incidental?
I apologize, I don't. I'm still trying to figure out the technology.
Okay, that's fine.
Right.
All right. So I'd like to call the question on this.
I agree. I move to approve the request to fund the lobbyist to obtain funds for the harbor dredging project.
Second.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, aye.
Justina, aye.
Brian, aye.
Mike, aye.
Oh, Helen, I, sorry.
Okay, motion carries 5-0. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
very much
Good
for your
presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, select board investigation update from the state. Ryan got some information from the AG's office, and only one of us can be appointed by the select board for it to go forward. We did get a decision sent from a previous case. Maybe Ryan could explain it better.
Okay. So Helen brought up the concern last meeting that if we appointed people to serve on a committee, or not a committee, if we appointed people basically to do this, that it becomes a subcommittee. And the state has ruled that subcommittees are subject to open meeting law, which means that any interviews or where two members are interviewing the same person or discussing findings of an interview, that those discussions would be subject to open meeting law. And that wasn't really what the intent was of just trying to figure out where the town finances are. And that might prevent some people from speaking candidly. And so, but then, when I discussed it with them as to how to set it up, in compliance with open meeting law, the state said normally that basically somebody is hired to do this, but that it is possible to basically appoint a single person who serves as basically the lead of it, and then that person can ask whoever they feel necessary is to help with that, provided that it does not form a quorum of another board, or another board that might be then subject to be subject to open meeting law. So that's basically where things are at. And just to be clear, Mike and I have not met or discussed town finances since that,
No, Ryan took this directly to Attorney General's office right after the last meeting. So,
So what would you like us to do? Do either of you want to continue with this and choose who looks into it? How would you like to handle this, Michael?
I would just suggest appointing just myself to do it.
I think that would be the easiest.
Helen has her hand up. Go ahead, Helen.
Surprise. Yeah, so thank you, Ryan, for looking into it. One of the things I found disturbing and fascinating about what happened in Brookline, I hope we all read this letter from the AG's office, was that they were told you can weasel out of this. So, Mike, I agree with you. If you still persist in wanting to do this, great. Just one of us does it, and then one of us reports to the rest of us.
Yes.
And the weasel thing that happened, in case some of us hadn't read the letter about the thing, what we got back, was that it really it could end up being two people, and that's too many. And also, thank you for looking into it, because this time I got it right. I don't always get things right, as we know, but I did get this right. And it was discussed, the nuances of this, in that last open meeting law workshop or whatever, seminar, webinar that the state held. And it was interesting. Thank you.
Okay. Justina?
Yeah, it's my understanding we're going to appoint a main contact person, and but that main contact person Helen can have the help of the second person. So I moved to amend.
Yes, they can, Helen.
Helen,
yes.
Ryan talked to the Attorney General's office.
Excuse me. What I just said was, yeah, you can get away with it, but it actually achieves what is otherwise forbidden. And I think it's a weasel way out. And I don't think we have to function like that. I trust Mike to interview people, or maybe it should be Ryan that interviews people.
It's really important to have a second person, because the ear and the eye and the memory are faulty. That's why Helen, let me finish, please. That's why it's really important to have two people, two listeners. Did you hear him say that? No, actually, he said this other thing. It's really good when you're having one person interview someone to a second person take notes, because the memory can be faulty, particularly when someone's in a dialogue. It's not a weasel way. It's a way of having more of a standard. I do some small business consulting through the Small Business Association, SBA, and they don't let you do it solo. Why did they not let you do it solo? Well, they want two people in the room. That way, if somebody has like a complaint, or something goes wrong, or there's any kind of problem, there's a second person in the room who also saw what happened, and it's more professional, and it's just really a standard way that like personnel interviews are done to it's just normal. It's really.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I completely agree with that.
It's not a weasel way out. And Ryan was very thorough. Everybody's tried very hard to accommodate your, objections. We waited 2 weeks to accommodate you, and I think that we've been fair to your concerns.
Please don't personalize this to me, Justina. I completely agree with you about the second person. And I think that either Ryan or Mike can do it as one person from the board.
No,
and to invite another, hold on, now I'm speaking, allow another person who is not one of us to be with him or him. And that's the weasel thing, was that they were both on the board. They were both on that municipal group. And there are a lot of other people that could be invited to come along and take notes. This is common practice, Justina, you're absolutely right. And that's a very good idea. And I'd like to ask Mike and Ryan why you feel you have to do this together, given that even though you wouldn't be appointed, you would still both be on the board and you would be at these meetings together. And it's a loophole. So how do you guys feel about it?
I just think it's at the discretion of whoever the main investigator is. And that's yeah. So that's it for me.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what we're doing here is rescinding that vote, amending it to appoint only one member, which, I mean, I would gladly do it. And then whatever happened would be, under my discretion. So if I could, I could reach out to another board member for help, but that person would not be appointed as the member, right? So that's where the difference lies. It's not the same. it's not a weaselly thing. But if I decided, well, actually, I'm going to get help from here or there instead, it would be up to my discretion, which is what differentiates it from how it was set up before, which made it a subcommittee, which makes it different in the eyes of the open meeting law. So there's a reason why it's okay, because it's not a weaselly thing. The open meeting law defines what you can do. You know what I mean?
But the end effect is the same. You see, that's why it's weaselly.
No, it's not. It's not the same. Because
two people on the board in the same room.
Yeah, that's allowed, Helen. That's allowed. That's what happens at meetings, or if you go, if there's two people, you don't form a quorum. You're allowed to like talk with one other board member without forming a quorum.
I'm going to call the question.
Okay.
I move to amend the appointment of both members and appoint Michael DeVasto as the main contact person for the investigation.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, aye.
Christina, aye.
Ryan, aye.
Michael, aye.
Well, Helen, no, because the AG's office has told us you can't appoint two members to do this.
We're just appointing one.
No, that wasn't the motion. Janet moved to appoint two members.
No, she didn't.
Oh.
Yes, she did.
No,
First of all, Justina
appointed
did.
Mike.
I read the motion in the packet, Helen. I'll read it again. I move to amend the appointment of both members and appoint Michael DeVasto as the main contact person for the investigation. It's as printed in your packet.
And I seconded it.
Well, we can all listen to the audio later. So Helen, nay, and thank you for wanting to know more about this. I just don't agree with the process. Thank you.
Okay. A motion
I don't
carries.
know if you want to hear from Chief Polly or not, Michael.
Oh, Chief Polly got his hand up?
He does.
Go ahead,
Chief. I understand the conversation. Could I just make a suggestion for everyone's consideration?
Sure.
I've worked in 2 different states doing investigations at the state level. Perhaps if Mr. DeVasto would like someone to be there with him I would suggest bring in maybe a retired department head, someone who's familiar with the community, familiar with the town departments, just to be that person. And it kind of makes it maybe a little cleaner. And so that there's 2 folks in the room. That's my suggestion.
Okay.
Good idea.
Thank you, Chief. I'll be reaching out to you for advice. Okay.
That's it.
COVID-19 updates and recommendations. I guess I have one update, and that is there seems to be some community spread on the Outer Cape, Wellfleet as well. The new variant has been found in Massachusetts. They know it's much more contagious than the original strain of the virus, and it's definitely a time to be vigilant. We're kind of on the cusp of the vaccine and distribution of that vaccine. And I, actually know someone who's in the hospital right now. This virus is no joke, that person's in their 30s, and it just really, there's no way of knowing, how hard it's going to hit anyone. So I would just urge every member of the public, to just be cautious, and take it seriously. That's all.
Still, continue
to take it seriously.
Yeah, it's easy to get fatigue.
I have fatigue from this meeting right now.
I was going to say.
Every meeting.
Oh my God. Okay, Lily.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about this. I urge you and anyone who's watching to look at the county website. They have updated it, and there's more information on it. I just received an email from as an update that next week they will start, in fact, vaccinating people that are over 75, and they've shifted things around a little bit. So people with 2 comorbidities are not going to be in that next phase. They'll be shifted to the phase after that with those over 65. Again, there's pharmacies that are also doing the vaccination, and the links are on the county website.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lily. Ryan?
Yes. So this is mostly for Chief Polly. So at this point, have all the EMS services been vaccinated?
At this point, all of the Wellfleet fire personnel have been EMS personnel, fire and EMS personnel have been vaccinated. They just finished up all of the Cape Cod first responder personnel to have their first vaccinations. Everyone has to go through, or everyone should go through their second vaccination, which is within 28 days. But I think I'm answering your question, Ryan, that not every department, fire or police, not 100% of every department population has chosen to get the vaccination. Again, here locally on the fire department we have, but I know that's not the case with other police and fire departments across the Cape.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Select board reports. Does anybody have a report?
More of an announcement.
Okay.
That should have gone in the beginning, but there's going to be another Massachusetts Shellfish Initiative meeting at 11 o'clock on Friday, the 29th. And I'm going to go to it as I went to the last one. It was helpful, interesting, and disturbing. Less disturbing than it might have been. Thank you. And thank you, Mike, for serving. Mike was may I just say Mike was very good at it. So I'm reporting that I went to it, but I'm also saying that Mike was very good at that meeting. Thanks.
Okay. I'm not sure what the disturbing part was, but that's all right. We can't talk about it.
No.
Reports. I was going to report the same thing, that meeting's coming up. So thank you, Helen. Nothing else from the board. Let's move on. Town administrator's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mostly, my report contains things that just on fiscal matters that from Heather, and she's free to chime in. You know, we've been going through and looking closely at contracts and authorizations for payment, to include, you know, what's in the VADAR system and the issuing of 1099s for tax purposes to contractors. We've identified a number of them that probably should have been receiving 1099s in the past. You know, in prior years, we've only issued about 20 of them, and we've issued about 80 this time around. So good work on Heather's part and staff's part looking at that. We've started the audit process, gathering information for our auditors. We're also looking at some streamlining of how we handle payroll. You know, literally payrolls being handled and entered 2 or 3 times, and looking at what the possibilities are of streamlining that with our payroll vendor. Every time you enter data, you increase the possibility of making a mistake. So we're looking closely at how to streamline that. I'm used to systems where, you know, a department enters payroll information, it goes directly into the payroll system, doesn't have to get re-entered again by payroll when it gets there. So we're trying to get that together. They're also looking at, just working through, budget data and what our VADAR system is able to do. Unfortunately, it doesn't come with the expandability automatically that systems that many other municipalities are using, and be a big ticket item to be able to expand that, but we're going to pursue what is best and make some recommendations along the way. And then just a couple other things to mention, money-wise, Public Works got Chapter 90 funds to fund the backhoe. So we will no longer be requesting that as a CIP budget. And they were also able to get a grant to pay for a generator, and that should be corrected in my report, that generator will not be for the Council on Aging building, but for the Public Works building, just because of what the eligibility was. And then personnel matters, as you can see, we've got some hiring going on, hiring committees being put together, moving forward with filling the Rebecca's old position, the harbor master position, and the assistant town administrator position, which I will say I've heard loud and clear, that people want somebody with a planning background, and we have a number of great candidates, and planning is certainly one of the things that a number of them have. So, that position spends the lion's share of its money, its time spending money, basically getting out bid packages to support grants and initiatives that come through from the select board and are approved at town meeting. That is probably the thing that keeps that position the busiest. We would certainly have to rearrange some things if that was ever going to change. That needs to remain as priority, but certainly, we can make sure that someone has a planning background. I'm also looking at all the different boards and commissions to make sure that they all have a staff liaison. There needs to be, some good connection between those boards and commissions, and the staff, and the work that needs to be done on the staff level. With that, that's all I have, unless Heather wanted to add anything to what I've said. Thank you.
Ryan?
Yeah, so I have two things. One is with the staff liaisons. For many of the boards and committees, including some of the regulatory boards, they don't list a way for the public to contact them besides a phone number and the mailing address of town hall. And they should be listing who the staff contact is, so at least the public has somebody that they can contact about and send in their correspondence.
I agree.
I mean, right now, the Conservation Commission doesn't have one listed. And I wonder how they do their correspondence because of it. And the other one is, and you kind of brought it up here, but this goes back to your previous town administrator report, but since you brought up the audits. It said that an extension of the scope has been requested to audit the enterprise and trust funds. Were those not being audited before?
Heather, can you answer that? I don't think they were. They should have been.
So, not digging into it completely, I can tell you that any fund that is owned and under the fiscal responsibility of the town should be inclusive in the scope of an audit. Thus, it should be included in any random selection that the auditors make to perform audit. I don't know that there's any proof of what I have seen thus far. Of course, I haven't gone back 10 or 12 years that those funds have been looked at in any selection or even in depth, but we've asked for them to be looked at in depth, as well as some other parameters that we expanded the scope to.
Okay. And then because they are enterprise funds, would they be sharing some of the burden, the cost burden of an audit?
I haven't seen evidence that that administrative burden has been placed on any of the enterprise funds. It seems to have been funded fully by the general fund, which in my personal experience, that is very normal. But we could certainly talk about expanding that funding source moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Justina?
Yeah, first of all, I really enjoyed this report. It's very thorough, but the way it's organized makes it very skimmable. It looks like you put some time into it, and thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice report. Second of all, I know we got a lot of recruiting going on, and I really admired the recruiting process, both with the town accountant and with the building inspector. I liked the way that you had the assistant TA and you both screened the building inspector. And then, as I recall, there was you had a little committee do the town accountant, if I'm recalling. And I thought that was really thorough. I admired that, because I know personnel, sometimes you just want to get the position filled already, I have in the past, and sometimes that works and sometimes I've been impulsive. So I'm wondering, with the assistant harbor master, if we can do a similar screening process where we have a little committee, or maybe you've already thought about that.
Sure. So the way I'd like to do the bigger positions, in particular, and I like to include staff in those, not just myself. But for instance, the assistant town administrator position, Harry Turkanian is going to be on that. Ray Ann Palmer, who recently retired from Truro, will be on that, as well as Suzanne and Rebecca and I. So, I'd like to include people, and sometimes I like to include staff, honestly, for their own experience. Sure. We included some folks in the interview committee for the accountant that had never been asked to be included before, and I think it gives folks buy-in and looking at things from an angle that I might not look at. So absolutely, for the harbor master position, we have a gentleman whose name I'm not remembering right now, who used to be on the select board. We also have the well-respected harbor master from Chatham. Will be on that committee. So it's my intention to sort of, broaden it a little bit beyond us, so they look at things that I might not look at, but also include staff, where it makes sense.
Sure. And I would hope we would put someone from the Marina Advisory Committee, only that committee is really does yeoman's duty. We have in this town, and I'm sure you know and have noticed, real professional expertise on some of our committees, getting funding and serving for decades. I know you noticed Jim Hood on the Water Commission getting grants and, kind of running the infrastructure. And I think the Marina Advisory Committee is one of those, and they have to work with the harbor master. So I really would encourage representation of one of those committee members, because I think there's the chemistry is going to be important too, and buy-in. Absolutely. So I'm not trying to tell you how to do your job. I don't know a whole heck of a lot about that area of things. I don't have a boat, and it's not my passion. But I think I really have respected the way you've done the hiring. It's not an easy area, and I really would hope that you would honor that committee by thinking about I don't know how many people are on that committee. It's got to be 5 people. Maybe one of the people that serve on that committee could be given a seat at the table because the unique relationship, and I think they go back to a decade or two, some of them. So
I appreciate
that's
that.
just my 2 cents.
Thanks,
Maria. And thanks for the report. It's really nice to have it be so skimmable.
Okay, we're coming up on, it's 9:35 now. Helen, you're up.
Yeah, Marina, thank you for all you do. And I'm going to tag on to what Ryan brought up. In the cases of groups that don't have a secretary, right? Somebody else has to be contactable. And that person whose email address will be on that, let's say, department, it's the person who works there. But if it's a board or committee, we got a lot of committees, a lot of boards, commissions. If it's someone that isn't the secretary, then it has to be clear to that person, and they have to maintain, and this could be Rebecca, actually, a group email address for that committee that has to be updated. In other words, people come off, and sometimes that name is still on that committee's webpage. And that happens a lot. So that would be included in making that whole group contactable. Now, I know a number of assistants ago.
Helen,
hold on. I have one more sentence, Mike.
Okay.
A number of assistants ago, one of the contactable people who was the executive secretary maintained group email addresses for all those committees, all the many committees. And it was just a matter of ping, and they got the correspondence. And that was the one thing I wanted to bring up about, to tag on to what Ryan said. But
that's like 5 seconds.
My question for Maria was, from your report, I see that you did speak with the DOT about the status of bike trail projects, but months ago, we want to set up this meeting, and let's just do a Google poll with whoever is appropriate in the two agencies, the park, the Bike and Walkways Committee, and us, or however you want to organize it, and get it going. Because what I'm afraid of is they have not hit the pause button. They may have. And we need to talk about it and reset, recalibrate in relation to this project. And that's what this is me responding to Maria's line in her report. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I actually just address that for 1 second?
Yes.
Very quickly. Helen, everybody that sends in the way it's supposed to work now is Courtney and I set up when the agenda is sent in. The contact person is the chairperson for that board, and the email is at the top of the agenda for every meeting that is set. So, and we're working to make sure that every chair member has their email so that I am able to send them an email if there's any information that needs to go out. I'm actually working on that list right now.
Thank you.
Okay, I was just going to suggest, Helen, that sometimes some things can just be sent in an email.
Right.
And don't have to go, the full length on here. Just as a concern for the overall time, the meeting length. That's all. Okay. So on to now topics for future discussion.
I just started a running list for you guys, and we can knock it down every meeting if that's what you want to do. These were your three from your last meeting, and then we can just keep going if you want.
Right, we'll keep adding to it and taking off of it so you can, just see the things that you've talked about before rather than giving you the blank form.
Okay, that sounds good. I like to see it every meeting to remind me what we've already said. So, does anybody have anything?
Well, my future concern I already brought up, overlapping with Maria's report about let's get this meeting with the roundtable meeting with the people concerned with the bike trail issue and the Route 6 improvement issue together and have a meeting on it. Future concern.
A meeting about the bike trail, all agency. Okay.
And bike ways. And maybe they'd host it, but the point is just to get it on the calendar and do it. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Not right now. Okay. If something comes up, email me and Rebecca.
And me, if you don't mind.
And Maria.
Yeah.
And Maria. Sorry. I just assume you guys get all the same emails. Yeah. Just email Rebecca, and Maria. And let's move on to correspondence and vacancy reports. We have the letter from Chief Polly.
Which he already mentioned at the beginning of the.
He already mentioned that. But I'd like to.
You're breaking up, Michael.
Have a really great. Sorry. Okay. So, seems like my internet's cutting out. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I was just going to say thank you to everyone involved with that, and our fire rescue is so great. I just want to thank them for doing such good work in town. Anyone else have anything? No? Minutes? Somebody wants
I moved to, are we already at minutes?
Yeah, unless you want to go over the correspondence.
No, I think we've all talked about that. I'm just looking for the dates of the minutes. I don't know why they're not right here.
January 12th. I just want to let you know that I did change something that was pointed out. I originally said that Ryan Curley abstained, and it wasn't Ryan Curley. It was Justina Carlson, but I switched that. So when you approve them, they're already amended.
Okay.
Okay. So I don't have I'm sorry, Rebecca, I didn't copy down the date, but
I'll just
move to approve them if I knew the date.
January 12th.
Okay, I move to approve the minutes of January 12th, 2021.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Janet, aye.
Justina, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Helen abstain.
Okay, motion carries 4-0, one abstained. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second.
Okay. A roll call vote.
Janet, aye.
Justina, aye.
Brian, aye.
Michael, aye.
Oh, Helen, aye, and good night, guys. Thank you.
Okay. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for sticking with us, Chiefs.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.